2, 1.
Bore da a croeso I cyfarfod bwrdd iechyd Prifysgol Cwmtaf Morgannwg. Hoffwn I estyn croeso cynnes I bawb sy'n gwylio heddiw. Good morning and welcome to the Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board meeting. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all who may be observing the meeting today. We are broadcasting today's meeting of the board live, providing the opportunity for anyone with internet access to observe in real time using a link that was shared via various channels prior to the meeting. I would like to therefore extend a welcome to all who may be observing the meeting today. In relation to today's proceedings, I'd like to note the following. For those observing, I just wanted to advise that we may not always be looking at the camera, as we are also referring to our board meetings papers throughout the meeting. We will also be taking a very short break at an appropriate time during the meeting, after about an hour at around 11 o'clock and possibly again at 12 o'clock, depending on the timings. For board members, as you will be aware, questions on the consent agenda have been sought in advance of this meeting. I have been advised that one question has been raised regarding agenda item 3.1.4 on the consent agenda, and a response has been made on the agenda itself, and I assume you are all content with that response. I would like to welcome Councillor Geraint Hopkins to the meeting. Councillor Hopkins has been successfully appointed to the Health Board as the local authority independent member. Board member colleagues will get an opportunity to meet separately with Geraint as part of his induction programme, and I am sure you will join me in extending a very warm welcome to the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Board. I would also like to welcome Stuart Morris to the meeting. Stuart has been successfully appointed as the Health Board's new Director of Digital. Stuart commenced in the role in December, and a welcome to Stuart too. I'd like to welcome Claire John, Sister of Ward 6 Palliative Care, Ysbyty Cwm Cynnon, to the meeting. Claire is here today to present the board with a patient story as agenda item 2.1. I would like to welcome colleagues from Audit Wales to the meeting. Mark Jones and Steve Stark are attending to present agenda item 5.1.1, Audit Wales Audit of Accounts Report, and Dave Thomas is attending to present agenda item 5.4, Audit Wales Annual Audit Report. I would like to welcome Rebecca Good, Business Manager, to the meeting. Rebecca is attending to present agenda item 5.3, Targeted Intervention Self-Assessment. To give you advance notice, at the end of today's meeting, I will be asking colleagues how you think we have done. There are a number of questions set out at the bottom of today's agenda that are there to act as a prompt for us all to consider as we work through the items for discussion today. I encourage all members to keep this in mind and offer reflections and suggestions at the end of the meeting to ensure we are working effectively as a board. I am also asking all chairs of committees to adopt the same approach after each committee meeting of the board. If I go on to the next item, apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Paul Mears, our Chief Executive, and Greg Dix, Director of Nursing, is acting as the Chief Executive Officer while Paul is on leave. On to item 1.3, declarations of interest. We've not been notified of any additional declarations of interest prior to this meeting. I don't know if there's any others that, if there is a declaration of interest that colleagues may want to raise today outside of that. No, okay. If I could then go on to item 2 on 2.1, which is the patient story. We will now receive a presentation from Claire John, Sister on the Palliative Care. The story relates to a patient that was admitted to Ward 6, Ysbyty Cwm Cynnon, as they were unable to manage, the patient was unable to manage the pain at home. The ward arranged for the patient to see friends, family outside of the hospital setting and arranged transport, etc., and help with makeup and clothes. So if I could then invite Claire to do her presentation, please.
Thank you, Emrys. I'm absolutely honoured to be presenting the patient story today. This patient was admitted to the ward for symptom control of pain and had lots of physical and psychological impacts in relation to a diagnosis. very sociable person, loved her family, loved her friends, and wanted to have the opportunity really to say that she wanted to celebrate her life with people who were important to her and to say goodbye to everyone. And we were able to facilitate that with the help of the Welsh Ambulance Service, who provide an amazing service in the form of a wish journey. So that's given to patients with a life-limiting illness, and they get to choose somewhere that they would like to be with people who are important to them. And it's all fully risk assessed by the Welsh Ambulance. It's led by a gentleman called Edward O'Brien, and it's all very, very safe. There's a paramedic present, there's a technician. And in this instance, because this patient needed assistance, there was an opportunity for a nurse to attend from the ward as well. And I was delighted to be able to do that myself. The patient chose a venue which was really close to her heart. She actually invited people who she wanted there, and a local venue supported all of this arrangement with all the specific risk assessments in place. Bearing in mind this did occur last summer and we were still within the pandemic. However, a lot of the restrictions had been lifted, but we still adhered to very specific guidelines, as in the majority of people who attended the venue were outside, and if they did come inside, they wore a mask, they sanitised their hands. So we were very mindful of that as well. So when the patient arrived to the destination, she entered via a concealed entrance. And when we arrived in the function room had been decorated beautifully by her friends and her family. And a bed rental company very, very kindly gave us a bed free of charge for the day. The bed was decorated with a balloon arch and with flowers and fairy lights. She was made comfortable, and then we opened the blinds of this very large bay window, which was overlooking the terrace where all her family and her friends were. And the day was absolutely glorious. It was a beautiful summer's day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. The sun was shining through the window. She opened the window. She was waving to people. The smile on her face was absolutely amazing, really. She was just overwhelmed by seeing her friends and her family in one place, really. She sat in her bed. She said she felt like a film star. She felt like a pop star. She certainly looked like one. She had a beautiful shirt on. She had sunglasses on. She had a hat on, and she was just so happy. People came in to see her, and with her permission, they had a picture. She spoke with them. She had some food. She had a gin and tonic in the sunshine. And it was her opportunity really to do things on her terms. I'd just like to share with you, in this patient's words, what the day meant to her, really. And she said that the staff had been nothing but wonderful in their thought and care of me during my stay. I think we might have lost signal for a moment.
No, we can still. I can still hear you.
That's
Claire.
Lovely. She said, yeah.
Claire, sorry to interject. Your camera isn't on at the moment.
All right. Okay. Bear with me. There we are. I've turned it on. Here I am.
Okay.
So in her words, she said that she felt like $1 million, and it was her way of sticking 2 fingers up to the disease. She felt like she was pampered and spoilt, and that she actually meant something more than the disease for the first time in ages. She felt that she was able to say everything she wanted to say to everyone who needed to hear it, and she felt that she could face the future with peace in her heart. And that was so meaningful for all of us who were involved, really. It was something that was really, really, really special, and I don't think I'll ever forget it in my career.
Well, thank you very much, Claire, for a very positive story, and I'm sure very difficult. But I think the what certainly came over and what you shared with us today was how personalised your response was to make things well for the patient. And obviously it was her needs where the big focus was, and I can see that she appreciated what the work that was being done. What I will do though, Claire, I'll just ask if there's any colleagues who want to ask any questions or provide any comments to your presentation today, and then take it from there. I think, can I invite our Vice Chair, Jane Sagrove, in, please?
Diolch, and thank you, Claire, for sharing that story with us. I mean, for me, it shows how you and the team actually care for the whole person. Obviously, there's a physical disease at work there, but actually it's equally important to actually think about the mental health impact on that individual. And what really struck me was how you actually thought for that single individual exactly what would make that difference for her, and remarkable what you did for her. And I think for any of us, if at those late stages of life you can achieve peace, that's a real gift. So thank you from me.
Thank you, Jane. Can I invite?
Thank you, Jane.
Can I invite Linda Thomas in, please?
Hi, Claire. You don't know me, but I'm the Chief Exec of Macmillan Cancer Support, as well as being an independent member. So the story that you've just shared, I found completely inspiring, particularly as somebody that's worked so hard to, really try and get personalised care on the agenda at end of life, because that's sometimes so difficult to achieve. So a bit like Jane, I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you and your team. I think it's amazing. Honestly, I really found it very, very moving to hear the words that the patient said to you about how, that you'd actually felt that made her feel like $1 million. How amazing is that? If we had time for a quick question, I guess my question would be, how often can we do this for patients, and how do you and your team manage to be able to do this? Because obviously I understand working in palliative care, there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of pressures, on you and your team.
There's not a set limit to how many times we can offer the wish journey through the Welsh Ambulance. What I will stress about the wish journey and the service is that it's completely voluntary. So the ambulance staff do this in their own time, and it's all very much risk assessed and completely safe. And we've used it on 2 other occasions for patients. Unfortunately, I can't share their stories, but they were equally as special, and it was just something that was amazing to do, particularly in the current climate we've all faced within the last 2 years with COVID. It was just so positive, and it just meant so much to the patient, and all those services came together for that person for that day.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Claire. Can I invite our Medical Director, Dom Herford, in, please?
Thank you, Emrys. Claire, thank you. It's really to say on behalf of everyone what an amazing team you are, and to thank you for it. I mean, I know that this isn't the only case, as you've just alluded to, where you've gone that extra mile for your patients, and actually even not just the wish service, but actually just what you do for your patients every day in the service. So please inform the team that you've presented here. We're incredibly grateful to hear it, but thank you to the whole team really for everything. I just want to get that on record, that all you've done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're very fortunate. We have a superb team here. They are very, very special.
Okay, if I could invite Fiona Jenkins in, please, and then Greg Dix, please. So Fiona.
So thanks, Claire, for that story. Very impactful, and it just sort of reminds us all that actually the majority of people would prefer to die in their place of choice and their place of choice is very largely not hospital. So actually the services that we can develop and wrap around individuals and their families to support them in their their last days is just so impactful. And I sense this is something that we should be considering to scale. So I guess, Claire, my question for you is, what capacity do you have? Do you see this potential to extend these type of services?
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to do that. And sometimes it's like anything, isn't it? It's the personal touches that make the biggest difference. And that could be even something like when somebody is discharged back home, just taking a route that is nicer for them, visiting a park on the way, just to see something that was special for them, really. And obviously it's always about the patient. It's always about the patient's experience. And at our point of the patient's journey, we can't get it wrong. We can't. It's so important to get it right.
Okay, thank you, Claire. If I could then invite Greg Dix, our Director of Nursing, please. You're on mute, Greg.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Lovely,
thank you. Nice to see you again, Claire, and thank you so much for sharing that story with us. It really sensitizes the board in relation to what we're all here for. And I know that care is fantastic in your unit. I just wanted to update board members. We have 3 palliative care units across the health board, and regrettably, when some patients die in our acute hospitals, with the experience on occasion isn't as positive. And I do think we need to do a lot more with supporting our acute wards with our palliative care units. And I know there's been some discussion, I can see Claire nodding in relation to how can we better support last days of life patients within our acute hospitals with some of the fantastic staff we have across our palliative care units who have such expertise in ensuring a dignified last few days of life. So it's a fantastic story, Claire, really humbling to hear, and I still think we've got a bit more work to do across certainly last days of life in our acute. But thank you very much for sharing that story.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Claire, I've no further questions or comments from board members, but can I just say again, just to echo what colleagues have said, but thank you for sharing with us a really positive look on end of life care and sharing the wish journey with us, which has certainly further enabled the board's thinking about what the work that's going on to improve the outcomes or get the best care or end of life care for the patients we have in our service. So thank you again, Claire.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Can I then go on to item 3 then, please, which is the consent agenda. To ensure we focus on business critical activity and discussions at this time, we continue to use the consent agenda for this meeting. I am assuming that everyone has read all papers under the consent section. Are there any issues that anyone wishes to move from the consent agenda to the main agenda for discussion? No. I therefore propose that all members present are happy to approve and note all items as requested. If I then go on to item 4, please, which is the main agenda. Are there any matters arising from board members that are not considered on the action log? No. Can I then go on to item 5 then, please? And I invite Owen James to present the report on charitable funds annual report and accounts, please.
Hello everyone, hope you're well. So yeah, this report is to present to the board the charitable funds accounts and the annual report for the year ended 31st of March 2021. Also included is the audit of accounts report from Audit Wales and they are here to present their findings later on. The board, as trustees of the fund, are required to approve the annual report and accounts, and if approved, authorise the chair yourself and the Director of Finance, Sally May, to sign the annual report and accounts on their behalf. In terms of the annual report and the accounts, they are attached in the appendix for your reading, so I won't go into too much detail on them because they are quite long. So, but you will see some main points from the report, in that the assets of the Charitable Fund have actually increased quite significantly from 1920 to 2021. It's gone up from 3.1 million to 3.8 million in terms of net assets. Obviously, this is mainly due to the donations that have been received during the COVID-19 pandemic and relating to that. And we've received a number of grants as well from NHS Charities Together, from the including the Captain Tom, Sir Tom Fund. Obviously, we thank all those who have provided donations, and now we're working for a strategy and ideas with the Charitable Funds Committee to spend that money in line with the objectives of the charity. So that's great. In regards to the audit, whilst this is later than it usually would be, I think normally we'd look to get this completed by October, November time, but as with last year, this has been delayed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and Audit Wales's resources to complete the audit prior to this. However, the deadline for the submission to the Charity Commission is the 31st of January, so we are in line with that. In relation to the actual audit that was undertaken, I do want to give thanks to my team. I think the audit went very well. We provided working papers to Audit Wales in a timely manner, and were very proactive in answering any of the queries they had. So I think that is reflected in their findings going forward. As you will see, Audit Wales are giving a unqualified audit opinion, which essentially means that the accounts show a true and fair position and are free from any material misstatements. So you will see in the audit report and the cover report that I provided that there is a small uncorrected misstatement of £1,225 reported. It is quite small. We decided not to adjust it because it has been recorded within the 21-22 figures, so therefore going forward the balance is automatically sorted out. So you know the fund balances will be adjusted by that value going forward, so everything is correct going forward. So I just want to give assurance to the board on that. The letter of rep, which is included in the appendix and the Audit Wales report, will also need to be signed by the Chief Exec and the board chair yourself alongside the accounts. So so we're asking the board to approve the annual report and the accounts for the Charitable Fund Committee for the year ended 31st of March 2021, and authorise yourself and Sally to sign the accounts before they're submitted then for the Auditor General Wales to sign them, certify them tomorrow, and then they'll be submitted by the deadline of 31st of January, which is on Monday. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Owen, please? No, there's no questions or comments there. Can I confirm that members are happy to approve the report, please?
Sorry, Patsy, I think might have a question.
Sorry. I didn't see the.
Yeah.
Sorry, Patsy.
Sorry, Emma. Yeah, Owen, thanks for that. Very comprehensive. Just a quick question on the tax recovery on gift aid. 2,000 seems a very small amount. Is there a process in place to encourage donors to complete a gift aid return?
Yeah, so a lot of the gift aid that we receive, we were able to do it through the Just Giving page. A lot of the donations we receive obviously come through the direct into the accounts, not via Just Giving. I will go away and look further into that question in terms of how we can do it with the ones that come in direct to us. So that's obviously often through checks and backs donations that we receive through the bank. So it's retrospectively to do gift aid is difficult at that point, but when people go through the Just Giving page, that's when we're able to do the gift aid kind of submission. So I will go away and see if there's a way of kind of increasing the number.
Okay, thanks, Owen. In a previous life, I used to manage this and send a letter out to anybody thanking them for their donation, but also if they're a taxpayer, would the charity would benefit hugely from them just signing and give them a return slip. That's what I used to do, and it used to make quite a difference.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll take that away.
And then I'd like to invite Jane Southgrove in for comment, please.
Thank you. It's a general comment, and I think it's one I make every time we consider this. And that it's great to see that the fund is so well managed in terms of income. And I do appreciate it's been an extraordinary year that we're looking at in retrospect. But we do really need to keep a focus on how we actually use these funds to meet the objects of the charity. We're not a charity to build up funds of capital and keep adding the interest on. We're actually here to use the money wisely to the benefits of patients, staff, etc. And I'd really like to see us having some more plans about how we actually use this money going forward. But thank you, Owen. Clear report.
Yes, I agree with that, Jane. In terms of that, I'm spoken to Sally May, and we did bring it up at the last Charitable Funds Committee that we will be developing a more substantial and robust strategy going forward, which includes the use of these funds, so we have more clear plans, long-term plans for the use of the funds, rather than maybe being quite reactive over the spend as we are currently. So yes, we are planning on taking that to future Charitable Funds Committee.
Okay, I can't see any further questions or comments that are wanting to be asked. Can I ask the board then, are they to approve this report on the annual report and accounts for charitable funds, please? Yep, okay, the approval made, thank you. Can I then go on to the next item, please, which is 5.1.1, which is Audit Wales Audit of Accounts Report. I invite Mark Jones and Steve Stark to present the report, which members have been asked to note.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just take a couple of minutes to highlight a few points. Some of them will cover what Owen had covered as well, but it's worth reiterating it from the auditor's perspective. The main message is that we intend to issue an unqualified audit opinion on the annual report and accounts. This means that the Auditor General intends to certify that they're materially true and fair, and that they're properly prepared in accordance with accounting requirements and the Charities Act. So that's a positive outcome and an important outcome, just to reiterate that point that Owen made earlier. There is one uncorrected misstatement which is in the report, that's £1,225. This is a small amount, we recognise that, but it's above our trivial level of £1,000, and therefore we are required to report it to you and draw it to your attention. And as Owen said, that amount is set out in the letter of representation that the Chief Exec and the Chair will be signing later today. There are some corrected misstatements. They are set out at Appendix 3. There's 6 items in Appendix 3, and they mainly relate to misclassifications within the accounts. but none of them are significant corrections, and they reflect well on the overall quality of the accounts. So nothing too alarming in Appendix 3 in terms of what was corrected. Overall, as Owen said, the audit went very smoothly, and that's in large part because the office is preparing good quality draft accounts, but also underlying evidence. So the underlying evidence was also to a good standard and supported a good set of accounts. And we haven't raised any formal recommendations for improvement this year, so that's a good sign as well. There are no recommendations in the report, so a positive outcome in that sense. And subject to your approval, and I know you've just kind of done that, subject to your approval and your e-signing of the document by the relevant officers and the chair, the AGW is due to certify them at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. And then when that happens, we return them to you so that officers can send them to the Charity Commission, as Owen set out. So other than thanking officers, Owen and his team, and Owen and Mark and their team, for helping us to progress the audit to time, etc. Just happy to take any questions you may have for us as the auditors.
Are there any questions or comments for Mark, please? No questions have been made or comments made there, Mark. So thank you very much for presenting that report there, and we've noted your comments and what we're required to do. Can I just change the agenda slightly, because we've just had Audit Wales do a presentation of the accounts report. Could I then move to agenda 5.4, which is the Audit Wales annual audit report, and invite Dave Thomas to present the report, which members are also being asked to note, please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. Thank you for that. Yes, you've got the Auditor General's annual report for 2021 in your papers today. That essentially is a summary of all our audit work at the Health Board for the last calendar year, ended last year. It covers the audit of the accounts, which the board will have had a fulsome discussion on back in June of this year, and the Auditor General's value for money work as well. Chair, I will assume that colleagues will have read the report in detail, so I won't go through it line by line. I'll just highlight a few issues and then leave a bit of time for questions if there are any at the end. On the accounts summary paragraphs, just to highlight the fact that the Auditor General has given a clean and qualified opinion, reflecting the Health Board's ability to have a balanced financial position at the end of the last financial year. That was discussed, as I said, in the board back in June. There's been a more further detailed report to the Audit Committee in October of last year, where some particular recommendations for action were identified. Those have been accepted by management and are being acted on as far as we can see. On the value for money side of the report summarises the COVID specific work we put in the programme last year in relation to the Test, Trace and Protect programme, the vaccine rollouts, and what NHS bodies across Wales were doing to support NHS staff wellbeing. You'll see from the summary paragraphs in the annual report the positive comments the Auditor General has made in each of those areas, particularly the vaccine rollout, reflecting the tremendous progress which has been made across Wales in that particular area. Those reports also identify some ongoing challenges and opportunities, and those are summarised in the annual audit report as well. These are all Wales pieces of work, but they apply equally to each individual health board, so they are reflected in the annual report. There are also a number of governance related summarised in our annual report. They relate to the work we did on the governance arrangements at WISC, also the Health Board's own structured assessment, and our joint review of quality governance follow-up work with Healthcare Inspectorate Wales. In each of these reports, we reflect the progress that has been made and is being made. We also highlight a number of areas where there are opportunities for further work to be undertaken, and those are reflected in the summary report you've got in your paper today. And in particular, I think we'll recognise there is ongoing work in the quality governance space, especially as the Health Board looks to carry on addressing some of the specific service concerns it's dealing with at the moment and respond to external review recommendations that it's got from ourselves and from other external bodies as well. Chair, finally, I'd just like to record our thanks to the Health Board staff who supported our audit work during an incredibly challenging period for the service. We're extremely grateful for the open and helpful way that staff have engaged with us during that time. And I just asked the board to note the Auditor General's annual report. I'd be very happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you very much, Dave. Are there any comments or questions anyone would like to make to Dave from the Audit Office, please? Audit Wales, please. No, there are no comments or questions to you, Dave. Thank you for giving us a comprehensive overview in the report, and thank you for sharing us the headlines of some of the actions that we need to do, but also your findings in relation to how the Health Board is progressing. So thank you again, and we will note it accordingly. Can I then go on to item 5.2, please, which is the Organisational Risk Register. Can I invite George Galletley to present the report, which members have been asked to review and approve, please?
Thank you, Chair. So you've got the risk register in front of you, which has been through all of the scrutiny of the committees that have met, bearing in mind that some were stood down to help respond to the booster vaccination programme. So jumping straight to page 2 of the cover report, it highlights the new risks that are now on the risk register, changes to the risks where the risks have either increased or decreased in their score, and also closed risks. I don't intend to pick anything out in particular, more than happy to take questions on specific risks, and I'll defer to my executive colleagues. It is worth noting that obviously this risk register has been through the scrutiny process, but it is an iterative process. It's constantly being reviewed. So there is a revised risk register going through the system now. It is worth just noting a couple of things that are emerging. We had our senior leadership team, a strategic leadership team meeting last week, where we raised a couple of issues. So if I can, Chair, I'll just pick up on a couple of those. So one of the risks, Datex risk ID 4071, which was failure to sustain services as currently configured to meet cancer targets, has been reviewed. It has looked at the enhanced monitoring processes that are in place, the different assurance steps that the Health Board has deployed, but it has been reviewed, but it still remains at a risk rating of 20. That's considered to still be appropriate, but I just wanted to let folks know that that has been under a thorough review. There's also risk in relation to pathology waiting times. That was discussed at Quality and Safety Committee last week. The Chief Operating Officer has agreed to look at that as a specific risk, recognising, however, that there is a significant amount of improvement work already underway, but that is being assessed. It's also acknowledged by the Strategic Leadership Group that a number of review dates have passed, notwithstanding the disruption, as I've outlined before, in relation to focusing on the booster vaccination programme in relation to COVID. But it was highlighted that actually we do need to make sure that a review of those dates is undertaken so that they are reviewed in a more timely manner. So that's something that's a high priority within the executives as leads for each of those risks. It was also noted following discussion at Quality and Safety Committee that there are a number of risks that rely on business cases to mitigate the risk, and given the financial situation the Health Board's in at the moment, that wasn't deemed an appropriate mitigation. So we're making sure that each of the risk leads are covering off mitigations that don't rely solely on business cases. That's going to be picked up in all of the risk reviews, not only obviously by the lead executives, but in the QA process as well by the team. Callie, my Assistant Director of Governance and Risk, is going to meet Greg and Howell, the Director of Nursing and Director of Workforce, soon to discuss risk 4106. That's the increasing dependency on agency staff cover, which impacts on the continuity of care and patient safety. That was raised at the Quality and Safety Committee last week, and we just need to make sure that we are working through those mitigations and actions in a timely manner. So that's what I wanted to pick up on the specific risks. Just as an aside, the board will know that we are working with the Good Governance Institute to revise our board assurance framework. That work is progressing really well. We have a board development session early next month to go through what that draft is looking like so that we can test that and socialise that with the board, with a view to that coming for final approval at the next board meeting. So that will cover off our new strategic risks, which
which will be aligned to our organisational goals that are later on in today's agenda. So sorry, I feel as though I've talked a lot of information at you there, but yeah, happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, George. We've got 4 questions. People want to ask questions. That's Patsy, Jane, Ian and Fiona. So if I can invite Patsy in to ask the first question, please.
Hi, George. Thanks for that. Just a couple of points, really. The new risk around insufficient resource for Welsh language team and risk that has been reduced for 110 about not being able to comply with standards. Isn't not being able to comply with standards a consequence of the new risk, and therefore shouldn't those two things be combined? And given your comment on business case not being appropriate mitigation, and this comment is absolutely not to devalue the use of the Welsh language, because this comment applies to anything else as well. But at points, we as a board have to make a decision to live with a risk, yet the risk register doesn't reflect the fact that we've done everything we can, and the board have agreed that they will try and mitigate as much as possible, but actually there are other priorities, and the board has accepted it has to learn to live with that particular risk. So I would suggest somewhere within it that is recorded. I don't necessarily expect you to respond to that, but they're just general comments. The other couple of things is the risk 4784, which is around the consultant presence in neonatal. We know, because we've got a paper later on this agenda regarding the neonatal service, and it would just appear to be a little bit too soon to reduce that risk. I'm not sure it seems appropriate, because whilst we're out to advert and we've got fixed term people in place, there isn't a permanent solution to this. So, and we know that there are issues because we have the paper later on this public board, and therefore it would just seem a little bit too soon to be thinking about reducing that. And really the same for 4747, which is the overnight district nursing cover. Again, there's no permanent solution. The solution is bank staff, agency staff, people doing additional shifts, which cannot be relied upon. And therefore the risk is, whilst it's being mitigated, the risk isn't actually being reduced. So they're just a couple of comments.
If I may come back on those, is that okay, Chair?
Yep.
So first and foremost, the absolute valid point you raised about the risk tolerance. We have looked at risk appetite late last year. We're looking at it again, but that's around appetite. We also need to look at risk tolerance and risk treatment. That's all going to be built in following the implementation of the revised board assurance framework. So really valid point, and I think it particularly in the current environment, there are things that the board are going to have to accept, that a level of risk tolerance around some high risk areas. But yeah, very valid point, and it is something that we will flag. If I may, I'll defer to my executive colleagues, for Howell for the Welsh language query, and to Dom for the neonates, if that's okay.
Thank you, George. So just two things I wanted to say there, if I could. So one is on the broad risk on Welsh language around standards, and the other is around resources. So just on the standards, I take your point there, Patsy, in relation to the consequence that one is of the other, but there are a number of facets that contribute towards our ability or otherwise to meet the Welsh language standards, which aren't just about the resource within the Welsh language team. So the Welsh language team plays a significant role in that, of course, but most of the business actually, in relation to compliance with the Welsh language standards, is discharged away from the Welsh language team. They are only, you know, a relatively small team, and only ever will be a relatively small team. So I think it's probably, there's an updating of the risk that needs to happen to reflect the current position of the Welsh language team in relation to meeting the standards, but that risk will stay more broadly in and of itself as a result of some of the issues that we have across the health board. Specifically then on the resource within the team, I think there are two issues. There's an immediate problem, which is that we've recently lost our Welsh language officer to another health organisation in NHS Wales, and that's a risk for us, but we've actually just recently appointed into that role, so that mitigates that risk for us considerably. We've also lost some translation resource, and translators are very difficult to come by, particularly with the skill level that we require. We've been very fortunate actually up to this point to have a very robust translation team, but we're working through that. So that's one bit of the resource thing. The second bit of the resource thing is a broader point on how well the team is resourced or not. And I think that's a broader thing, which is about within my team prioritising the resource across the whole of my directorate and making sure that we've got the resource in place. I don't think that's a business case issue, because actually we should be able to manage that. I think it's just a case of me needing to work with my team as part of the IMTP and indeed the prioritisation of our resource as a team, and making sure that we've got the right resource for Welsh language, which we're doing at the moment. So they're two connected but separate issues, if that makes sense. I hope that helps, Patsy.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Tom, you're on mute.
Always catches you out, that one, doesn't it? Yeah, thank you, Patsy, for those comments about the neonates thing. I do see where you're coming from in saying we don't have a permanent workforce in place at the moment. However, the risk register obviously reflects what's currently at play at the moment, and at the moment we have a much lower risk service that we have got. Reducing it on the risk register will actually demonstrate that we're providing an excellent service now, as the report has been showing that coming out. There's no reason to say that we wouldn't be able to recruit. The signs are that we have people who are interested. So therefore, I wouldn't sort of argue that that is necessarily going to be a problem that we can see on the horizon. But if we did, we would have to raise the risk register on it, risk value on it again. So my argument would be to reduce it now while we're fine, and then review if we do have a problem in the future. But I'm happy to pick those up. But there is going to be a broader discussion later on with the Neonates paper then, and so some of those issues might also be offset by reassuring everyone then on what's actually happened and what the process is currently.
Okay, is that okay with you, Patsy?
Yeah, fine, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Could I then invite Jane Sagrove in, please?
Diolch, and thank you, George, for setting out the position. Just for assurance sake, I absolutely understand that assessment of risk is a moving feast, and that it's difficult to necessarily bring the most up-to-date version to committees, because the executive team I know considered this earlier this week. Could I just check that in your presentation you flagged any material issues where risks have increased, or where board just needs to be cited on the current position?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. So the risk ratings haven't increased for any risks this period. As I say, there are a couple of them under review, and I did highlight the one that we felt has had a review and stayed at a high risk of 20. So there's nothing that has come through the process that I feel needs to be escalated any further than's already set out in the report. Obviously, where risks have decreased, that's a good sign, and obviously we've got new risks as well. They're the only ones really that I've felt needed highlighting. So yeah, I think that there's nothing that's increased.
Thank you, that closes the loop for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you, Jane. If I could then invite Ian Wells in for comment, please.
Thanks, Emrys, and thanks, George, for the report. And obviously, as we've noted before, all the work that you're doing to update the organisational risk register. I've got a couple of comments, however, and you sort of mentioned this earlier on, really, in terms of updating things and timing and so on, and the situation we're currently in. However, there's a few risks in there which have attracted national attention, and we haven't had any update since August and July in some cases. So I just wanted to mention them. Don't necessarily want an update now, but it would be useful if the board can have an update to them. And the first one is 4253. That's the Bridgend ligature plan. Then we've got some which are related to the Merthyr ED plans, the patient flow through the system and so on. So there's 4688 and 3563, which are related to that. And as I say, that one we haven't had an update since July. And the T-Llydiad one, which has got a particular spotlight on it from Welsh Government as well, that hasn't been updated since August, and that's 4149. So if we can maybe, I mean, offline, or I suppose, have an update to those things, because of the, they are important as well, but they're also attracting national attention. So it'd be useful for the board to have sight of what's happened since the summer in relation to those. There's two other areas, as you said earlier, George. Some of the committees have been stood down because of the current situation we're in, and there's two that come into my committee, Digital and Data, that I wanted some up, possibly now, if anyone's around that can give me an update. The first one is 4672, and that's the Clinical Coding Transformation Plan. Clinical coding has been something that we've had our attention on for quite a while now, and a plan to try and resolve that issue is really important, given the increasing importance of clinical coding. So if maybe we can have an update on that. And the other one is something that's been kicking around for a while. It's an unusual one, and a lot of people might not be aware of it, which is 4693, a medical device connectivity issue, which is medical devices connecting to our network, or the inability of them to connect to our network, and therefore report information back. So maybe somebody can comment now on those two on behalf of the Digital and Data Committee.
Thank you, Ian. So yeah, I've made a note of all of those risks. I think, as I said before, all of the risks, there's a high priority to make sure that all of the risks undergo a review, given the criticism around the timeliness of reviews. I've made a note of all the ones that you specifically highlighted, and I'll make sure as a priority they are reported back to the board outside of the meeting, as an update ahead of any further formal updates that are received. The two risks relating to digital and data, I'm not going to put Stuart, our new Director of Digital, on the spot at his first board meeting, given he's on, I think, week 5. But again, unless there is anybody who is present who's able to update on that, can I suggest that we take those away and again make sure we provide that update and assurance outside of the board meeting, and we'll make sure that we provide that to the whole board, not just to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for that, George.
Okay, just one point on that. I know Jane, our colleague Jane Sagrove, would like to make a comment on Ian's point, please. Jane?
Thank you. It's a more general point, really, around the 3 quality and safety risks that Ian raised in relation to the ligature plans at Bridgend, the flow at the Merthyr ED, and the T-Llydiad escalation. Clearly, there's a bit of getting out of sync in terms of the updating of the risks, as opposed to the scrutiny, which I can assure board is taking place in detail in the Quality and Safety Committee. I wouldn't want anyone to have the impression that we've not looked at those issues. We have, and we are watching them closely and the progress. We do need, however, as Ian rightly points out, to get the risk register in sync with what we're actually talking about. Thank you.
You're on mute, Ian. Ian, you're on mute.
I think he may be having trouble with his microphone, Emrys.
Okay. Thank you for that, Jane. And I can see that Ian was going to respond to you on that as well. So maybe that's something we can catch outside the meeting. Can I now invite Fiona Jenkins, please, to make a comment or ask a question.
Hi, it's a comment really. I was just wanting to draw attention really to one of the risks that is for all of our staff, but particularly for the staff groups that come under me. So this is on page 4 of 16 and 8 of 16, risks 4798 and 4500. And these are staffing for therapies and staffing for psychology. When there's some explanation of what we're doing within those areas, but we are short of staff in those, as I know we are in nursing and medicine. But I get speaking for the professions that come under my umbrella, I wouldn't want to think that we've done nothing since November. So although we haven't updated since November, there's a lot of work going on to look at the graduates that are coming out this year, to work with the University of South Wales that are developing 2 new courses for part-time applications for occupational therapy and physiotherapy, but also looking at the offering graduates jobs who will be qualifying in the summer. However, one of the issues we have is that we're also needing to influence Welsh Government policy, which restricts our ability to recruit outside of Wales. So currently we're having to hold vacancies for this summer's recruitment, which means that we have gaps that possibly we could fill in other ways. So I just wanted to give the board assurance that we're working hard on this and getting staff in, supporting staff and trying to maintain staff within the organisation is one of the key bits that both myself and my deputy and assistant directors are working on.
Thank you for that, Fiona. Can I then invite James here, please, to comment or question, please?
Thank you, Chair. This, I'm afraid, goes back to the Welsh language issues. This is risk 4888 and 4110, which cover the issue about resources and standards. And I'm just wondering how confident we can be that our current scoring, our control measures that we have in place and the mitigating actions actually accurately reflect the various factors and challenges that the Health Board faces, because we, in one sense, suggest that we can lower the risk for failing to comply with Welsh language standards, but at the same time we've lost resources. We know that there's a challenge and we're pushing that out to others to actually sort of cover them for us. But how confident can we be that we're not going to receive enforcement action for failing to comply with the standards? And that's, I think, is behind the question here. Just challenging whether we can give complete assurance that, or reasonable assurance that what we've got in place actually reflects both our risk appetite and the actual risk that we're facing.
So that the specific query there in relation to the Welsh language, is there anything in addition from Howell that you would like on that assurance, James? Plus the issue I referred to earlier around the tolerance work and the risk treatment work that we need to undertake. Is there anything else specific that you wanted for discussion or assurance this morning?
Yeah, very briefly, the 2 risks I mentioned, they seem to conflict with each other. One, we've lowered the risk for failing to comply with the standards, and a risk there being prosecution for failing to comply with the risks with the standards. But at the same time, we accept that we've got fewer resources to actually comply, and they seem to contradict each other, or perhaps I'm missing something.
I think Howell did address that earlier, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Howell.
Yeah, I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, Jim, the 2 are linked, but they're not entirely causal. So our compliance with the Welsh language standards is far broader than the Welsh language team itself. It has a bearing, it has an impact, of course, but it is not entirely for the Welsh language team to drive our compliance with the standards. But I think what this is telling us is that those 2 risks need a bit of work, I think, is the bottom line there, James. So we'll take that away, do a bit of further work on them, and hopefully clarify them for a further meeting, if that's all right, James.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, James. Thank you, Howard. I don't think there are any further comments or questions I've received in respect to the risk register. There are a number of issues that have been identified within the risk register today, and a number of challenges for us to consider, and a number of responses made accordingly. And I do note some of the questions around the correlation, perhaps between the QPS and the risk register, is something we need to perhaps just confirm prior to coming to a board meeting as well, so that we know that we are there's a singing of the same tune, if you want to say, on the actions that we're taking as a health board as well. Okay then, thank you for all your contribution to that item, please. Can I then go on to the next item, which is 5.3, and it's the targeted intervention self-assessment. And I invite Rebecca Good to present the report, which members have been asked to approve the self-assessment score, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the paper's there. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think many of you, and hope many of you, were there on the 20th of December when we had our last self-assessment session where we agreed the scores contained in this paper. The update outlines some good progression, many in level 3 now, which is results, and 1 or 2 moving more into level 4, which is maturity. So these were the scores that we agreed at that session on the 20th of December. As you know, there are 4 key areas that we focus on, which is leadership and culture, trust and confidence, quality and governance, and special measures, maternity and neonatal. However, at our next session, which is a showcase session, we're trying to move away from reporting specifically in those areas and more into an overriding improvement focused project, so it encapsulates some of the areas of TI and special measures. In terms of the next steps, we're working on the next plan on a page, which is our plan of activities over the next 6 months. We have a escalation meeting now on the 9th of February with Welsh Government. Our showcase session, as I just outlined, is on the 28th of February, and our next self-assessment scoring session is on the 28th of April. And I'll leave it there, Chair, and just over to ask if we can receive formal approval of our scores.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Are there any comments or questions that were asked to Rebecca before we go to approving what's been presented, please? No comments or questions, so I can I just confirm that everyone is happy to approve the report that we've just received?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, then can I then go on to the next agenda item, please, which is the creating health, and it's a 6.1. It's Cwmtach McGarnag University Health Board as a popular health organisation progress against population health goals. I'd like to invite Kelechi Noham to present this report, which members have been asked to note. Thank you. Welcome to Kelechi.
Thank you, Chair Borida Pub. I'm assuming everyone has had the opportunity to read this report. So with your permission, what I would just like to do is just make a few points, just by way of drawing attention to where we are with COVID. And the only reason I want to just focus on the COVID element of the report is that I suppose that's the bit of the report where between the point you write it and the meeting, a number of things may have changed. So if I can just seize the opportunity to draw attention to a few things in relation to COVID. And for the other elements of the report, I'm going to assume that they've been read. I'm not just going to reiterate any elements of it, and I'm very happy to stop at that point and take questions if that's okay. So with COVID, after several weeks of reduction in incidence of COVID infections, we have in the last few days begun to see early signs of an increase across our 3 local authority populations. And what it has done now is to bring current COVID activity to levels that were similar to those we had in late autumn of 2021. So as of today, the 7-day cumulative infection rate in CTM stands at about 518 per 100,000 population, which is slightly above the Wales average of 508 per 100,000 population. Now, those recent increases appear to be driven principally by increases in two age groups, so the 0 to 9 population and the 30 to 39-year-old population. And in many ways, we think that probably reflects the impacts of a population group that is either largely not vaccinated, so the 0 to 9 age group, because they largely are not in the JCVI categorizations for vaccination, and the likelihood that transmission at home and in schools may become a focus in coming weeks. As a related point, recent NHS data that is based on serosurveillance of blood donors in Wales suggests that about 98.8% of the Welsh population has antibodies to COVID, which is incredibly high, either through vaccination or natural infection. I think the only caveat to that data is that blood donors are generally not representative of the general population, but to the degree to which they represent the general population, 98.8% immunity is quite significant. So it's not surprising that the population group that is that appears to be driving the increase we're seeing right now, although it's early days, is the population that is largely not covered by vaccination. I know that the JCVI is currently considering whether to recommend vaccination of healthy 5 to 11-year-olds, and we wait upon that, but we are seeing increased activity of COVID in that particular population. I'd also add that inevitably attention is shifting to looking at how admissions to hospital are trending, and it is to a degree reassuring that we are not seeing a corresponding increase in admissions of COVID cases from the community into the hospital. Instead, what we are seeing is nosocomial infections, so that is people in hospital for other reasons and then catching COVID. So what some people would call incidental COVID. In the last week, for example, we've seen 15 new such cases in RGH, 14 in PCH, 8 in YCR, and a notable 32 in Princess of Wales Hospital. And these nosocomial infections, I think, will represent an area of risk and necessary focus for us as a health board, whilst we accept that they are not necessarily translating into very significant COVID-specific morbidity and mortality. So I'll stop by just saying that, bearing the above in mind, I think we do need to ensure in the health board that our current priorities on COVID focus on, one, protecting the vulnerable from severe disease, not necessarily infections. And increasingly you hear people talking about living with COVID, and what, in a nutshell, living with COVID means is that we'll shift attention from just looking at infections to actually looking at disease that is caused by COVID, or the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then secondly, just retaining effective surveillance mechanisms in the health board to ensure that we can identify any deterioration in the situation. And that means our testing infrastructure, that means our data and analytics and surveillance infrastructure in the health board need to be as sound as possible going into the next couple of months. And then finally, just remaining alert to the potential for harmful variants and mutations of concern that may emerge. I think, like I said, the implication of those above those priorities would just be the need for us to maintain a significant element of our infrastructure to respond to COVID when that happens. I think that's all I just wanted to say about COVID, because like I said, Chair, I'm very mindful that in between the reports being written and these meetings, a number of things move very quickly, and I just wanted to make sure that the board was up to date on the current COVID picture. The rest of the report is there. Hopefully everyone has had the opportunity to look at them. I'm happy to pause there and take any comments or questions.
Thank you very much for that, Kelechi. Are there any comments or questions that would like to give to Kelechi? Yes, if I could invite Fiona Jenkins in, please.
Hi, thanks, Kelechi. We couldn't have a board meeting without discussing COVID, given that we're still in the middle of the pandemic. And I just think, hats off to everybody for the work that they've done in responding to, what is an ongoing, unprecedented era. So it's great to see the data, the stats. But you can't help but notice that we've got the highest prevalence and we've got the highest need within our population. So coming through this, there is some significant work we need to do about population health. And it's great that the board is committed to its programme on population health. The other comment I wanted to make actually is that it's one thing having COVID, but we've got one heck of a lot of people who are recovering from COVID. So just wanted to raise awareness with the board that we do have a COVID recovery service. We've recently evaluated this, as has every health board in Wales, and an evaluation has gone to the Minister this month. We have the largest number of patients that have come through the COVID recovery service of any health board. And in fact, South East Wales is significantly the largest number of patients that are having support for their symptoms recovering from COVID. So there's great work in the team, and we're looking forward to the Minister making an announcement at the beginning of February, I believe February the 8th. The Minister will be making some announcement about long COVID services and where we go forward next year. But great work that the teams have been doing, and a good offer that we've got for our population. But obviously much more to do as we go forward into next year.
Thank you, Fiona. If I may just respond to that, I completely echo your thanks to staff in the organization. I think the response to COVID, I know staff have worked their fingers to the bones to make sure that we mount a competent response to this pandemic. So every opportunity to just say thank you to staff and everyone who's been working to support our response. That's great. I think you're absolutely right that it's one thing to look at the fact that we've been responding to COVID in the past 2 years, but actually a lot of the factors that led to CTM having some of the highest adverse levels of adverse impacts from COVID were factors that were already in our system before COVID. So the underlying inequalities that we have been very much aware. And so it is very pleasing that it's not just the health board, but the health board in partnership with our 3 local authorities have been looking very closely at not just what happened as a result of COVID, but actually what were the factors that led to the sort of outcomes that we saw. And we're currently articulating a piece of work in our partnership space. So that's the health board and our 3 local authorities, led by the leaders of the council and the chair, and of course the chief executives of the health board and 3 local authorities, with specific officers across our organization supporting that. And one of the key elements of that work is on tackling health inequalities, but also the health board has committed to this population health organization work. And you gave an example of long COVID as being one of the, if you like, morbidity long tails of COVID. But we also know that as a result of COVID, new research is actually suggesting that we can expect, because of the impacts of COVID on immunity, we can expect an increase in the levels of long-term conditions like diabetes. So we already had a significant morbidity level from diabetes, and as a result of COVID, we can expect that to increase. So it isn't surprising that the Welsh Government and Public Health Wales have invested significantly with health boards in what we call an All Wales Diabetes Prevention Programme. And again, you will see some of that in the population health report. CTM was already leading on a pilot of diabetes prevention in the South Canon, but now we're rolling it out to a number of other clusters across the patch to make sure that we get ahead of that curve that we can absolutely expect. So yes, COVID is going to have a long tail, not only in relation to long COVID, but also on the impact that it will have on multiple long-term conditions, and we've got to be able to respond to that. And I think that's exactly what CTM is doing, not just as an organization, but in partnership with our local authority colleagues.
Thank you very much for that response, Kelechi. I don't think I've got any further questions, but I will say there's a number of comments that I can see that have been received, particularly around the support that staff have been having during COVID, and certainly listening about the good work that's going on from the recovery team. Big thank you to, I know you mentioned yourself, Kelechi, about the staff and the health board and our work with the local authority in response to COVID, but I should also say we obviously give a big thank you to you too. You've done some excellent work for us in the health board that's been of value to us all in helping to manage our response to COVID. So thank you to Kelechi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I just say that it's now just coming up to 11:15. I'm going to propose that we take a comfort break and that we recommence the meeting at 11:25. Can I also say to you, or make a request to you, if you could switch your camera and microphone off until I come back to the meeting at 11:25, please. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everybody to the second part of the Cwmtamagannog University Board meeting, and I'd like to go on to the next item, which is item 7, improving care. And on its 7.1, it's the Clinical Advisory Group Highlight Report. And I invite Anna Lewis, Chair of the Clinical Advisory Group, to present the report which members have been asked to note. Anna.
Thank you, Chair. It's going to be a short report from me this month because, as you know, we stood down meetings in January, and the Clinical Advisory Group was one of the meetings that was stood down in January because of COVID. Being a respiratory consultant, I'm pleased to say that I can echo what Kelechi says in that our patients at the moment are not getting, generally speaking, not getting pneumonitis with their COVID. So although we do have lots of patients in the hospital that we're trying to manage from an infection control point of view, it's a much better situation that we've been in the past. So it's nice to be able to share a bit of good news from that perspective. So we met in December as a clinical advisory group, and we talked specifically about our sort of digital environment from the perspective of a frontline clinical worker within the health board. And we were very lucky to have Stuart Morris join us on day 3 of his job, along with Rob Bleasdale, who's our Chief Clinical Information Lead. And so we were able to voice, I think, a lot of the challenges that frontline clinicians experience in terms of digital and IT infrastructure. And I think the most valuable thing really that came out of it was that Stuart and Rob and Paul Mears were able to reassure us as clinicians that the board is well aware of a lot of the challenges that the clinical body face, and that, you know, a lot of them are already in hand and being tackled. So in particular, Bridgend and the sort of disconnect between Bridgend's IT systems and the rest of Cwmtaf Morganwg. Funding has already been agreed, and so it was very reassuring to know that that's being addressed. I think one of the most useful things that could come out of this is if that information was more widely shared, because I think a lot of the benefit of CAG is that there's a broad group of clinicians who come with problems and get a lot of reassurance. And I think if we could communicate some of those messages out to the wider sort of workforce, I think that would be very valuable in making people feel that the board is listening and aware of the challenges they face. There were a few interesting points raised in that meeting. Rob in particular raised the need for more clinical input into planning how we go forward with our IT developments, and he felt that there needed to be a group of interested clinicians who actually have time set aside in job plans to form a sort of almost like an advisory group to IT and digital development. There's also a recognised need for education of us as frontline clinicians. So I think our usage of the technology that we have is very poor. We don't understand and optimise what you as a board are paying for and providing. And we could certainly be much more savvy users of the technology that we've got. And that would allow us also to probably resolve some of the challenges that we face ourselves if we have a better understanding of the systems we're using. So certainly a programme of education on IT for frontline clinicians would be really helpful. And then a little bit more of a kind of military style response to equipment failure, using Rob's words. So the fact that, you know, we waste a huge amount of clinical time when a printer goes down or a computer won't log in, or for one person that might feel like a small thing, but if you look at that going on across the health board, we're wasting huge amounts of time. So again, you know, it's investment, but being able to sort of fix those equipment failures in a more responsive way would be certainly something that would improve everyone's experience. So that's my wrap up of December. The only other thing to mention is the CAG's been going for 8 months now, and George and Dom and I have all had a few meetings and conversations recently about CAG, how it's going, what its role is, whether we need to think about different ways of it working, and is it fulfilling what you as a board need it to fulfill. So those discussions are ongoing, and obviously we'll update you with any thoughts or plans that come out of it. But at the moment, that's all I've got for the CAG report. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Anna, and you've identified a couple of issues there, but also identified the work and the consideration that's been given around the role and function of the Clinical Advisory Board. I think in relation to some of the comments you made, can I invite Stuart in first and then Ian, if that's okay? So if I ask Stuart to as comment or question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Anna, and thanks again for the opportunity to come so soon into my new role to join colleagues. And just picking up some of your points, actually, in no particular order, but in terms of the Bridgend issue that you raised, again, just to assure you and assure the wider board, this week we had a really positive meeting with Welsh Government in terms of our funding for the patient administration system elements of that, and we're expecting to get that funding from the 1st of April. So I'm waiting for a letter and imminently, I think it's fair to say, in terms of assurance around that. In terms of wider engagement, I think you make a really a valid point in terms of how we socialise some of the challenges, but actually what we're doing about them as well, because I think following that group, and actually there was a leadership group and then a staff Q&A following that, where the clinical engagement that I'm now having, I don't know, I'm a new person to the board, to the health board, but it's been fantastic in terms of the response just from that one meeting. So actually what Rob and I are now doing is a regular engagement with a number of clinical medical colleagues over the coming weeks, and I'm actually going to meet some people in Bridgend this afternoon to get more clinical digital buy-in and leadership from them. So it's really encouraging to see, but you're absolutely right, and one of the conversations I've started to have with Dom is how we do actually get protected digital time within clinical and medical colleagues, and there's things that we're exploring with some of our university colleagues around like a digital fellow type arrangement for clinical medical colleagues. So really, that, you know, that from that perspective is really quite exciting. And in terms of responsiveness, I think it is a real issue for us at the minute, and that is something that we are addressing as a priority. So we've actually introduced some floor walkers, if you like, so actually new physical presence in each of the 3 DGHs to just go round. COVID has been, and certainly the latest COVID wave has been a bit of a challenge in terms of them being able to fulfill everything that we would like them to do, but it's a start of a much more responsive approach to digital. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I then invite Ian in, if his mic's working, I think, just to double check.
Yeah, can you hear me, Emrys?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I mean, I think really interesting report. From my music to my ears, from my perspective, since being the chair of digital and data, I'm glad to see that there's a focus being put on some of the digital issues that we have related to the clinical areas and so on. And I think maybe Stuart's had a baptism of fire. I think he's hit the floor running starting, and I can see from the report that, you know, there's a lot of issues have been taken on board already. So really glad to see that that this is being looked at in detail. I think something that we wanted to do for quite a while now. And thanks, Anna, for mentioning the training aspect of it. Of course, I mean, I think we forget about that sometimes. We put all of this hardware and software in all these systems, and we forget that the staff actually have to use them. So you have to train the staff up to actually use them. And I think that focus on that is really welcome as well. And one sort of little question that pricked my attention was on the horizon. Digital dictation was on the horizon. Maybe not something for you to answer now, but I was just wondering what the implications of digital dictation actually were. And I mean, if you don't want to answer that now, I'm having a detailed discussion with Stuart after this meeting, and I can bring it up then. So I'm sort of highlighting that in advance. Right, but thanks. That's great.
Shall I just pick up on it? Yeah, we can pick it up in more detail a little later, Ian, but there is a small pilot cohort of a few medics and clinicians who are now actually using new digital dictation technology, which is actually dictating straight into the record. So we'll go in through it in a bit more detail later, sure, but yeah, that's what that is.
Excellent. Can I just make a comment as well with regards to that, that's actually hugely important, because our secretaries do an awful lot of basically typing up endless letters that we dictate, and we do an awful lot of administration as consultants that we don't need to be doing. Now, looking at the challenges we have a workforce in the future, this is really key to be able to automate part of that system, and then free up our secretaries to do some of the admin that we do, frees us up to be doing the clinical work that we should be doing. So it's all, I think, a really important aspect of sort of our future planning, really.
Yeah.
To make things, so yeah.
That's great. Thanks for that. I mean, it pricked my attention because there's research going on at the moment. I declare an interest of taking digital speech data and converting it to a partial SNOMED CT information, which is obviously helping with the entire process. But yeah, thanks. So I won't waste any more time talking about my interests. But yeah,
thank you, Ian, and it's positive to hear that yourself and Stuart are meeting after today's board to discuss this further. I've got two further colleagues who would like to make a comment or questions, and the first one is our medical director, Tom Herford, please.
Thank you for that. Just so the CAG is in itself, I mean, led by Anna and the team, it's just a great opportunity to get everyone together. But I think what Stuart just said a minute ago is a good example of where it is useful. When we started out, we didn't think that actually a digital area was going to be something that would be really interesting. It's something we're finding as we go through. But basically what I wanted to say was at the end of Anna's comment there about how we're just trying to get it to work. It's an evolution. We kind of expected to have, here's a perfectly formed cake that's going to work beautifully. We slot it in and suddenly it runs. It's had teething issues, as we know, and we've got to just work with that to work out what the best use of it is. And we need feedback from people on the board here as well as to how they think it's working or not, to allow Anna and I to just adapt it so it actually is serving the purpose that we want it to serve for the board, but also for the clinicians. And I think we're getting there, but I think it just needs a little bit more work on it to get it just perfect. But anyway, that's what I want to say, and I want to thank Anna because she really is putting a huge amount of time and effort into this, so it's making a big difference.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, noting the thanks to Anna as well. If I could then call in our Vice Chair Jane Sagrove then to make a comment, please, or question.
Thank you, and thank you, Anna, for the report. I can absolutely see the impact of good workflow supported by good digital systems. I mean, it could be absolutely transformational for the day-to-day life of a clinician. Just wanted to bring out the quality and safety implications of having good digital. You talk about e-prescribing. In quality and safety, we spend a lot of time talking about medicines administration and making sure that the right prescriptions are made. And actually, one of the ways of helping clinicians to actually prescribe appropriately is having a robust e-prescribing system. Similarly, the consolidation of the patient records across the whole of CTM. I can imagine how frustrating it is for people currently, but equally the issues of having duplicate records which don't quite align when patients are seen on our different sites. Really important from a quality and safety perspective to get that resolved. So I'm really pleased that the clinicians have had the opportunity to highlight these with Stuart, and that Stuart is actually taking them on and running with them. Looking forward to seeing us progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Anna. And I've got a further comment from Greg. Please, Greg Dix.
Thank you very much, Chair, and nice to see you again, Anna. Anna, at the last board, you'd raised some concerns around a lack of nursing representation at CAG, acknowledging, you know, we've got, I think, in the region of about 4,500-5,000 RNs across the health board. And I guess just wanted to make sure that from my profession's perspective, that there's, have we increased the membership, number one, and number two, do you feel there's an appropriate balanced discussion in relation to all of our clinical professions? Thanks, Anna.
So we have had a few additional members join us who are from the nursing cohort, which is fantastic. I still think they're underrepresented. The difficulty is clear, isn't it? If you're a band 5 nurse and you're on a shift, then to take an hour out of that day to go to a meeting isn't a possibility, because you're part of the numbers for that ward and for that patient care. And so it's actually really difficult for them to engage. I think some of the nursing staff who have joined us are sort of more higher banding and in leadership roles, which is brilliant. And I know that there is a good communication between sort of the lower, like band 5s and their managers who will represent them to a certain extent, but to have their actual voice, I think, is always going to be challenging because of the way they work and the shift system that they work. And so I think we still feel that they are underrepresented, but it has improved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Anna. Maybe we could pick up a discussion offline to see what I can do to support better nursing and midwifery representation. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. There's no further questions or comments. Can I just say thank you very much for presenting this report here today, and it's certainly given us a few things to consider in taking these actions forward. Can I then go on to the next item, please, which is 7.2, which is the quality report, and I invite Greg Dix and Dom Herford to present the quality report, which members have been asked to note. So if I could hand over to you, Greg, then please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So colleagues, this report continues to evolve in terms of style and content, so any feedback would be gratefully received. And there is some work now underway nationally for health boards to agree a set of core quality and safety metrics, which will be great from our perspective in relation to benchmarking, and equally having a consistent measurement strategy across Wales, which is being triggered mostly by the new National Quality Framework and equally the Quality and Engagement Act, of which we're very involved. So this report will evolve. You would have noted this time, following feedback from board members at our last board, we have included a bit more of an exec summary, drawing out some of the key points of the report. And so this will be a bit of a triple act today. So I'll kick off with just a few reflections, then Dom, and then George. Board colleagues will be aware it's been incredibly busy across all of our sites, and the context in which we're working in is clearly set out within the introduction to this report. And I really do feel now that the level of absenteeism from a nursing perspective, we have started regrettably to see a shift in the increased numbers of hospital falls and specifically community acquired pressure ulcers. Now, it's always incredibly difficult to tease out whether there is a direct correlation between the increased harm events and numbers of staff on duty, and this is causing me a level of concern, and equally concern from the Quality and Safety Committee, where we discussed this in length at our last meeting, and I know Dom will talk through some of the challenges with medication issues. We have now reignited our pressure ulcer and our fall scrutiny panels, and we've had some specific targeted work at Angelton within Glanreed from a falls perspective, and the mental health unit within RGH, and we have started to see a downward turn, which is really encouraging, but I do feel we have a fair way to go. We've equally reignited some substantial improvement programs for both falls and pressure ulcers, being led by both my deputy and my assistant director of quality. So and quality and safety, rightly so, have asked for a spotlight process in our forward plan, so we can delve in a bit deeper in relation to some of these nurse sensitive outcome metrics which are causing us a level of concern. We have improvement Cymru supporting some of our improvements in practice around these particular harm events as well. So something I'm keen to keep on the board agenda. Also, I just wanted to briefly mention that we have now launched our well-awaited patient feedback system called Civica. We have piloted it within maternity, and we've started to see some results from that. There were some technical challenges in extracting some management information reports out of the system, but we have now that ability, and future board reports will see more indicators around the experience of our patients going forward, which is, you know, incredibly important for us as a board. From an IP&C perspective, again, regrettably, we haven't kept on target with some of our reduction thresholds, although in 4 indicators we are better than this time last year. Specifically, some challenges around C. difficile infection within the community and Staph aureus bacteremias within the community. It is one of our risks on the organisational risk register in relation to a lack of IP&C resource within primary care communities. We are just reviewing the model of IP&C support delivery, which is very much centred on the acute hospitals currently for obvious reasons. We need to do something different going forward this year in relation to some extra support for community acquired infections. At that juncture, I'm just going to hand over to Dom, and then Dom will to George, and if it's okay then, Chair, we'll take some questions following George's wrapping up of the report. So thank you.
Thank you. Dom?
Thank you, Greg. So I was sort of just touch on the 2 areas of medication incidence and mortality rates. Let's start with the more concerning one, was the medication incidence. As you can see from the graph of the paper attached, that since February 21, we've had a bit of a jump in our medication errors. Now, there are multiple reasons for this. I would just like to point out, I'm not saying that it's an acceptable number at all, but actually just because of the scale on the side, it actually means that, so June and July were the, sorry, June this year was the highest, but the June the year before, actually it's 17 more prescription errors. So that is 17 across the whole of the health board, which I know may not seem like a lot, but actually it's something we need to get on top of and really focus on. So even that is too many. Reasons for prescribing errors going up, they can be counterfold. There is an association, we know, between tired teams or overworked teams or teams under high pressure that's associated with medication errors, and normally through prescriptions. Now, that is something we're having to tackle at the moment. You know, 17 is still a higher number than normal, than our normal sort of a normal rate. But we're working through a programme, and next week we've actually got a medicine management board meeting, and it's one of the things on the agenda is what our initiative plans are. We've got ideas, we need to now get them going as to how we can start tackling prescription errors. So it is something that we've got in hand and we're very clearly aware of. Actually, administration errors has fallen, still too high. One error is alone is too high, but we seem to have sort of stapled out on a particular number. And again, that's something we need to start looking at as to why that still seems to be consistent, why we can't seem to tackle it and bring that down. So these 2 factors are the things that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of months. The mortality, again, can I just remind everyone that this is trying to take this sensitively, in that, you know, we do appreciate that each one of these deaths recommends a huge impact upon, you know, communities, families, and on the staff as well. But our rates actually have fallen quite significantly, and we've found that this particular wave of Omicron has Kelechi's already referred to earlier on, we've had far less mortality with it. We've had far less patients needing respiratory support and intensive care. We've had far less deaths from it. So that can be seen from the trends of the graph that we have here. So that's a positive for the future as we're going forward, that the COVID seems to be becoming less of an issue. It's more commonly spread. People are getting ill from it, but fewer are dying from it, it seems. So our lowest rate was 2.14% back in January last year, back in summer last year, and in January 21 it was 8.33, which is the highest rate, and we've come nowhere close to that again since. So this should also point out, though, isn't all about COVID. This is about normal deaths that happen across the health board. And there is an appreciation that we have to bear in mind now that it's not just the COVID patients we're worrying about, and it hasn't been for a while. There are a lot of patients out there with a lot of other medical conditions who are becoming debilitated because they're not being able to have their operations because of the stress and the strain on the whole system. And that is the same in our health board, in every health board in Wales and across the whole of the UK. But there is an appreciation that we need to bear in mind now that it's actually the focus needs to be on the non-COVID patients to get them through their elective operations, to get them back to the clinics that we have that support and treat these patients. And we're allowing to do that now as the case numbers are falling. But this is something that's a difficult balance that we have had to achieve over the last sort of year, 2 years, as to when we swing in terms of supporting the acute urgent case that is sitting in ED and the patients that we have waiting at home for their operations and need. And that is going to affect our mortality over the next sort of year, 2 years, maybe even up to 5 years. So those are my sort of comments on there, and I'm sure there will be comments from this to answer, but I'm going to hand over to George now to take us on to the next bit.
Thank you, Dom. So yeah, sorry for jumping around the report, but just to go back to page 5 of the report where we'll cover the complaints concerns element of it. You'll notice over the past year or so that we have had significant fluctuation in our response rate of our commitment to respond to concerns within 30 days has fluctuated over the past 18 months or so, primarily due to clinical pressures, but it did level off and we did get a good standing over the more recent months. However, that said, you will see the graph at the top of page 4 on the right hand side that we've taken a significant drop in our performance around December time. Not to rehearse exactly what my other 2 colleagues have said, but it is in response to the provision of the booster vaccination programme, where we refocused clinical efforts, which obviously would ordinarily be involved in investigating and responding to concerns, and that was refocused into the clinical areas for the delivery of the booster programme. The one thing we did try to do to try and mitigate that and ensure that all of our complainants were kept aware was write out to all of our people who have live concerns in the organisation at the moment. We wrote out to them explaining the situation, forewarning them that despite the clinical pressures, we would still try and respond to their complaints in as timely manner as we could, but due to the pressures that was unlikely to be within the expected deadline. So we stayed in touch with the complainants, tried to explain the situation, but we are still committed to try and respond as quickly as we can. The only other thing I wanted to refer to really is the Quality and Safety Committee did question around the communication element of some of our concerns, and I reported back to that committee around how we're going to be putting some communication training in place. We're looking at a variety of different sources to make sure that we have communication training as widespread across the organisation as possible. And not to preempt the scrutiny that will be afforded to a report, but just to let folks know that we are about to receive an internal audit report at the forthcoming audit committee that looked at our concerns processes, and we know that that's a limited assurance report. It's a really helpful report, gives us some really helpful recommendations. We've got an action plan that we've drawn up in response to that, and as I say, that will be considered at the Audit and Risk Committee early in February, and we welcome that to implement some real improvements in our concerns processes that we'll be working with the ILGs to implement. Other than that, nothing else to really draw the board's attention to. Happy to take some comments, and I think that concludes the quality report, and happy to take the questions from anybody who wishes to raise any.
Thank you, George. I invite Ian Wells for a question, please.
Yeah, thanks everyone. A quick question. I hope it's quick anyway. I'm trying to understand the data on page 7 related to the pressure damage incidents. On the last sentence there, it says, to date, an investigation has been completed for 1,802 and 257 recorded an outcome of avoidable, which was 14%. So that to me implies 86% of incidents were unavoidable. I don't quite understand how they were unavoidable. It implies to me they were definitely going to get pressure sores anyway. So maybe I'm missing something. Could somebody maybe explain that to me?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that, Ian. So not all pressure ulcers are unavoidable. So when we undertake our pressure ulcer scrutiny panels, we review the patient from a holistic perspective. So for example, if patients have severe disease, some patients aren't particularly compliant for various reasons in relation to our suggested measures to relieve their own pressure, especially patients at home, which is a big concern for us, different from a hospital perspective. And again, sadly, some patients that are in their last days of life, where their skin is naturally breaking down, regardless of how often pressure is alleviated. Sadly, some of these pressure ulcers aren't, unavoidable. So we, as I said, we picked back up the scrutiny discussions around pressure ulcers and falls. And what's really helpful, Ian, is that our lead TVN nurse, our tissue viability nurse, provides that specialist advice. And there is a lot of check and challenge actually in relation to whether a pressure ulcer is avoidable or not. Clearly, we don't want any of our patients to have any pressure damage, but regrettably, there are times when they do, and we really need to get underneath the community support, which, as I articulated previously, is causing me some anxieties. Through COVID, we had high absenteeism rates across our nursing workforce, including our district nursing workforce. So patients ordinarily that may have required 2 or 3 visits a day, sadly only maybe got 1 or 2. And thankfully, our absenteeism rates are now starting to reduce, but it's still a concern for us. We have obviously linked in with our local authority colleagues with this as well, because often patients at home will be provided care both from a nursing and a domiciliary perspective. And but encouraging patients that live at home by themselves specifically to encourage regular pressure relieving exercising, it is a bit of a challenge, to be honest.
Great, thanks for that explanation, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any further questions or comments from colleagues? Well, can I ask a couple of questions? My first question is to Greg in respect of hospital falls. And obviously I'm aware that from the presentation, falls can be as a consequence of environment or clinical condition or even staffing levels. Are there any particular themes that we're starting to identify at all?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, we are. So definitely falls at night. So we're starting to see some themes around falls at night, and in fact our improvement CTM colleagues were really helpful, certainly from an Angleton perspective, so clinic perspective in Glanreed, where we had seen quite a significant numbers of falls at night by tracking times of falls and areas of falls. Footwear. Patients coming into hospital, with no backs to their slippers or loose fitting slippers has equally been a concern for us. and we had seen an increased rate across our elderly mentally ill wards, so specifically Ward 2021 within the Royal Glamorgan. So and largely that was associated to some staffing challenges, and where we try to cohort patients when we can't offer an enhanced one-to-one supervision process. You know, some observations of care in relation to a lack of continuous oversight of those patients that come in with a high falls risk has been concerning to us. Through some of our analysis as well, Chair, you know, we haven't been on top of undertaking the full assessment and implementation of our falls bundle work. So when a patient falls, you know, reassessing their falls risk, which is ordinarily higher than admission. So we've got a few themes which the team are working on, but certainly probably falls at night is something we need to expedite our falls reduction work on.
Thank you, Greg. I can see there's quite a bit of work going on to assess what the issues are. My other question then to Dom then is that you mentioned in your briefing, Dom, about the fact that there's an increase, or I suppose there's the risk as a consequence of people waiting for operations or waiting for admission, or do we have when we are considering as part of our recovery work that we're doing within the health board, do we also do our own sort of risk assessment of those waiters as to when we should be prioritizing who's coming into our service?
Yeah, it's very hard to quantify what the impact actually is across the whole of the health board for all conditions. So even from a surgery point of view and from a medicine point of view, there's different factors, and also the major concern is what's happening out there that we don't know about, and that's probably the main worry that we've got, because we don't know that people are debilitating because they're not presenting to their GPs or presenting to the hospital services as well. So that's the unknown. In terms of how we go about assessing it and working there, when the patients are seen in clinic, they are reassessed. The clinical teams look again, and if they feel that they have deteriorated further, then obviously they will move up appropriately on the waiting list as they need to from an urgency of operation. And then we have a question of, do we do prioritising on clinical needs or from time that someone has been waiting for an operation time? And that is a very difficult one to answer. It's not going to be the same for a hip replacement as it is for a gallbladder operation. For, you know, everything is varying within that, so I can't give you a definite answer to say we're prioritising the higher risk or the long waiters, because it's varying across there. But the teams are reassessing, they're looking at patients, and when there is a clinical need, that does seem to be where we're trumping the longer waits, and that's not palatable or easy for those clinicians to have to explain to the patient that I'm very sorry, you're going to have to wait even longer because you're not as bad as others that we have got, even though you are in need of the operation. And that is putting a lot of toll on and pressure on the GP services here. They are managing these patients a lot more, and also the clinicians meeting these patients and telling them these things. And more importantly, it's having a big operation on a big impact upon our population and their mental health, sort of worrying and stress about when they're having the operations. There's not a very succinct answer, I'm afraid, Chair, for that question, but it is something that we are looking at. We are assessing all these patients as we go through, and clinical need clearly trumps other situations when we need to, but it has to be done with a sense of sensitivity, but also with an appreciation of what the condition is and what we can do about it.
Okay, well, I think what, I suppose for me, what I was hearing and what I wanted to hear, I suppose, in one sense, is that it would appear that clinical need is trumping waiting list times.
Yeah, it pretty much is. The other thing I should say that we're looking at doing is that even though we have 3 different hospitals and 3 different localities, that we're going to be working on a way of prioritising the need across the health board, so that we'll be looking at how we do our operations on particular sites. We're prioritising across the whole of the health board, not just within one locality because they do that particular procedure there. We're just going to do their cases first and everyone else waits. We're going to be looking at how we do that. So that will be, clinical need will be trumping everything else at that point for all of our population.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Tom. Jane would like to offer a comment or question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to underline the scrutiny chain that we go through. Obviously, you see from the Quality and Safety Highlight Report, which is on the consent agenda, that all these issues were explored in detail at the Quality and Safety Committee. And what I welcome is this summary dashboard report coming to board, which enables all board members to see what the issues are across the health board. And I think it's been a really good piece of scrutiny and discussion that's come out of that. But I wouldn't want anyone to be under the impression that we weren't looking at these in detail at Quality and Safety. And I'll be making the same point in relation to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jane. Can I then go on to the next item then, please, which is 7.3, and that is the maternity. Sorry, I've got I'm sorry, there's one other comment that wants to be made here. Sorry, Greg, did you want to make a comment?
I'm so sorry, Chair. I meant to mention this when I was chatting about falls. We have started to see some emerging evidence of an increase in falls amongst our inpatients that are waiting for onward care. So patients that are regrettably deconditioning within our acute sites, waiting for an element of onward care. Now, I don't have any charts or numbers to update the board with, but certainly through some of our full scrutiny work and those patients that are waiting in our beds are challenged and have an increase in risk of falling. We are trying to ensure that these we can capture through our risk management systems, but I guess I just needed to update the board in that we are equally concerned around patients that are waiting for onward care, and it's not just around flow of patients through the system, but potential harm that some of these patients may be coming to. Again, nothing really evident I can provide the board with, but we are keeping a watch on this in relation to those patients waiting. Sorry, Chair.
It's okay. Thank you very much for that, Greg. It's very helpful. Can I then go on to the next item, please, which is the 7.3, which is the Maternity and Neonates Improvement Programme update. I invite Greg Dix and Dom Herbert to present this report, which members have been asked to note. So if I could hand over to you, please.
Of course you can. Thank you, Chair, and Sally will join for this section as well. In an earlier paper, so the board members would have noted in Rebecca's report our assessment against the maturity matrix, and so mature for safe and effective care, mature for quality women's experience, and still in the results phase for leadership and management. And that is a work stream which I have had some concern around in relation to delivering the milestones we'd set. And it's largely associated to the work around leadership culture and some of our training compliances. The programme has been really challenged over recent months due to Omicron, and we've had quite a significant level of absence rates against the improvement team and our clinical workforce, as colleagues will be aware. I mean, across all of our services, not just maternity, but of course from a maternity perspective, we do have clinical staff working in the improvement teams, and again we do have to divert them to clinical practice at times of surge in demand. So that is a cause for concern in relation to some of our milestones that haven't been met as we would like them to be done. That said, on a positive note, our serious incident work is really gaining traction, and we're very thankful for the support the DU have provided in our root and branch review of our process really. And we had hoped to have cleared all of our SI backlog in maternity and neonates by the end of this month. We've had to reset that in terms of the current situation we face with the level of absenteeism, but those rates are coming down now. We've reset that for the end of February. Page 5 of the report takes you through the top programme risks, and as articulated previously, lots of these deadlines haven't been met in November and December, although we had a good maternity and neonatal improvement board this week, and I'm confident we'll get back on track in relation to delivering the work, certainly around the leadership and culture piece. And Howell's team have been incredibly supportive to the improvement team and the clinical service group in relation to supporting that work at pace. And just finally from me, from a maternity perspective, before I hand over to Sally and Dom, we now have a confirmed start date of our new Director of Midwifery. So Suzanne Hardacre, who is currently the Head of Midwifery within Cardiff and the Vale, was successful in the appointment to our Director role, and she will be starting on the 3rd of April. So I'm very happy to take any questions, of course, and I'll hand over to Sally and Dom from a neonatal perspective. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to do your bit and then ask for questions, Dom, and then ask the questions at the end of the item? Is that okay? Yeah.
I think
Is
that would
okay
be
with
fine.
you as well, Greg, as well? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, if I could hand over to Dom and Sally then, please.
I would just like to say that although I'm aware of an oversight on this, Sally, who many of you met for on previous thing, is the responsible officer and is in the nitty gritty of everyday activity with the neonates. So I think it makes most sense for her to be able to present this to you to answer then the questions that you've got. But I'm here obviously for questions as well that needed. So over to you,
Thank you, Dom. I will take that on. So from the neonatal perspective, the neonatal IPAF, it's fair to say neonates is at a less mature place in their progress compared to maternity, but we also completed an IPAF and we're in the results phase for all the domains, but there is movement within that and continuing improvements being made at pace, and it was encouraging to see during that IPAF session a much more mature discussion and understanding of what the whole process was about. So that was very encouraging. As Greg has pointed out, we've had challenges with staffing. Neonates is a small team and so can be disproportionately affected by absence, and certainly before Christmas, we were particularly hit by a high level of absenteeism, a combination of COVID and other reasons, which required some cots to be shut for a number of weeks. That was escalated to Welsh Government, and there is now a much better region-wide scrutiny of which cots are available and what each service is able to offer at the time, and that situation has improved now. Looking at the improvement programme, there's a number of areas which will be addressed in the next paper, but as you can see, unfortunately, we haven't been able to progress as much as we'd like in a number of areas, and that is almost entirely due to staffing pressures due to COVID. And this impacted on training for things such as the hypoglycemia pathway and developing pro formas, etc. Those are all ongoing and are being picked up at pace now. And I would expect to see improvements in those over the coming weeks and months. Bigger pieces of work such as the transitional care proposal, the SBAR is in progress and we're expecting to be able to present that imminently. Otherwise, I think you can see there as well, some metrics have been included in the paper, and we're starting, both quality and safety and the board have asked to see more service level metrics. And again, this is an iterative process, so if there are areas you'd like to see more of, please let us know. But we hope that with our dashboards that have now been developed, we're able to present this data and provide assurance that we are aware of the issues and are doing something about them. I think that's as much as I wanted to draw your attention to. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Sally. Thank you, Don. I've got a couple of questions here. The first one's coming from Patsy Roseblade, please.
Hi there. I just wanted to acknowledge the improvement in this report. I have been a critic of it in the past, both in board meetings and the other committee meetings. So it's only right and fair that I acknowledge the huge improvement in this board briefing, because as a board member, we don't live and breathe this on a regular basis in the way that you all do. And therefore, to get that summary at the beginning and to get improvements in the way that the data and the information is presented, it is really helpful. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Patsy. If I could then invite Carolyn Donoghue in to question or comment, please.
Thank you very much. I agree with Patsy. It's an excellent report. I just wanted to really look ahead a bit, and it mentions on the maternity paper the assumption that the leadership of the improvement programme will transition to the ILG structure. And I suppose I'm from past experience, sometimes a huge amount of improvement goes into an area, and then all those people that are helping with the improvement go, it moves back to sort of normal management and things slip back again. And I suppose I'm just wondering what checks and balances we can put in to make sure it's ready for that transition, and that there is the resource and the support there to make sure that the improvements are maintained.
I'm happy to come in there, Chair. So great question, Carolyn, and we predicted this when we reviewed the governance of the programme delivery, probably towards the end of last summer. So the Maternity and Neonatal Improvement Board that I chair since the end of last summer now includes ILG representatives. So just to get them up to speed in relation to the improvements to date and to allow and enable a smooth transition. It has always included our clinical service group leads, so the lead medic, the lead midwife and the lead manager. So I was confident that when we've agreed the conditions for sustainable improvement going forward, and Welsh Government make a decision in relation to de-escalate our status, that the transition will be as smooth as possible. We obviously take learning from Morecambe Bay, and colleagues will be aware that, you know, they worked incredibly hard on their improvement journey, and then for various reasons went back into a level of heightened escalation. I am in contact with the chief nurse of Morecambe Bay, although she's recently retired, and some learning from that was around, my understanding is a quick and sharp exit of their improvement resource, and not leaving enough capacity from a quality and governance perspective. So we have taken learning from Morecambe Bay, and we recently compiled our resource requirements for 22-23 with, again, depending on where we are with our escalation status, with a step down, step back model of transition. But it absolutely will not be, you know, on whichever day the day will be, that the improvement team disappear and the ILG team, you know, take over the responsibility. We predicted that, and we're working through that currently. But thank you for that question.
Thank you. That's really, really encouraging and so good to hear about learning from other places. I think that's very valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Carolyn. Can I now invite Jane Sackrove in, please?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Greg, Dom and Sally, for the update report. As I've mentioned previously at other boards, we have a specific assurance chain for this programme of change, which starts at the MNIB huddle, moves into the Maternity and Neonatal Improvement Board, through Quality and Safety and up to board, with most detail at the start of that process. Unfortunately, this time round, Quality and Safety came before the most recent meeting of the Maternity and Neonatal Improvement Board, which happened, I think, earlier this week. Thank you. And there was an opportunity there to triangulate what we hear through the improvement processes. I'm absolutely assured on the basis of that triangulation on everything, apart from one item which I raised at the improvement board, and I raise it now just so board is aware that we are scrutinising at all levels. At the MNIB, we received some HEIW reports, which actually flagged that the solution we'd put in place relating to pregnancy loss appearing at the ED at PCH was perhaps not as resilient as we would like it to be, in that the bed that had been set aside was not always available because of other pressures. We did have a discussion around that. I mean, it is normally available, but given it's one of the issues that Health Inspectorate Wales also picked up, I just thought it was important that board was aware that we'd had that discussion. I am assured that there is a permanent solution which is imminent, and that accommodation has been identified, and we're just working executively on a date when that accommodation will become available, and that will be a permanent addressing of that issue. So interim solution, not as resilient as we had hoped, but we are moving closer to a permanent solution. And I would anticipate we'll get a more detailed report on that at the next Quality and Safety Committee meeting. But I felt it important the board was aware.
Thank you for that, Jane. I don't know if whether Greg, Dom or Sally want to make a comment to Jane's report, comments.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So yeah, Jane's absolutely right. The resilience within the protected capacity on the gynae ward, specifically in PCH, has been challenging in relation to its consistent availability for, you know, the demand pressures we currently have. There is, as Jane's articulated, a solution which will require you know, some minor works within the footprint of PCH, moving some specialties around, and we absolutely will be bringing something back, Jane, to Quality and Safety to assure committee that there will be a resilient plan, you know, going forward. We do have comfort packs that we can provide to women if they are, again, sadly sitting within ED, waiting to be seen. You know, it is just a temporary fix. And but we are working really hard. Well, the clinical service groups are working really hard to ensure this space is made available as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Greg. Can I now invite Nicola Milligan in for a comment or question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg, Sally and Dom. Mine is a comment really on page 8 on the graph. It's really pleasing to see an improvement in attendance at the multidisciplinary team meetings, but I like a graph but for me, it needs to give us the right information, because what it looks like there is our midwives are far more committed than anybody else. But in reality, the amount of neonatal nurses and anaesthetic doctors are lower. So I think rather than show us a number who attended, it maybe should show us a percentage of those eligible, because it looks like a less engagement from everybody else of those improving. So maybe we can truly reflect, you know, that it is a higher number attending. It's just that they're a very small number. So maybe look at it as a percentage of those who could attend.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
great comment, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Nicola. Okay, I don't think I've got any further questions or comments from colleagues. Just a couple of points for me is that I know that I think it was Sally raised that if there was any further areas that colleagues felt could be included in the matrix, to let you know. And similarly then from a Greg perspective, the really positive news of appointing our new Director of Midwifery coming into the organisation, which is excellent news. And obviously picking up from colleagues' comments generally is about how hard colleagues have been working and the progress on the action plan that you've been putting in place. So well done to all in respect of that. That is also whilst recognising the challenges you have with COVID and the workforce situation. Can I now go on to the next item then, please, which is 7.3.1, which is the Neonatal Services Improvement Briefing Update. And I invite Dom Herford to present the report, which members have been asked to note.
Shall I take this, Dom?
I was going to do exactly the same line as the last one, actually, Chair. That's right. So Sally's going to take this one.
Thank you. This paper has been presented at the Maternity and Neonatal Improvement Board and at Quality and Safety. And I hope will provide an update on the deep dive escalation for neonates. By way of background, I'm sure most of the board know that neonatal services were incorporated into the programme of special measures alongside maternity services in February of 2021, and a neonatologist and neonatal specialist nurse were appointed in March of that year. They commissioned a deep dive into neonatal services, and that report is actually now due to be published in early February. The paper says late January, but that's been pushed back to early February. However, in August of 2021, IMSOP escalated some concerns that they had as part of that deep dive, and they highlighted 15 areas that they wished improvement on and 5 areas that needed immediate make-safes. So those 5 areas, first of all, prescribing. Practice, again, I can update further on the paper here. That SOP is now in place and available on SharePoint. So that's the standard operating procedure for safe prescribing practice. We had a formulated one some months ago, but IMSOP did have some comment on it, so it went back through the process of the governance processes, and that is now complete and available to teams on both sides. We've also appointed a neonatal pharmacist. That pharmacist again covers both sites, and she has a role in governance and education, as well as keeping an eye on safe prescribing practices and feeding back to individuals. And we've displayed good prescribing practice guides in the units as well for immediate referral to. They wanted improvements in the way that we discussed, or at least the way we recorded our discussions with tertiary units. So we've refreshed and revised our guidelines as to when our teams contact tertiary units and contact the transport unit with chance, and we've improved the way we document that so we can prove that that's been done. Another thing that we are going to institute is rotating our medical and nursing staff to tertiary units for a few days or weeks each year, and that's to improve sharing of information, as well as improving relationships between those units. Unfortunately, the COVID pressures have delayed the start of that, but that is ready to go once both units, both Cardiff and Merthyr, are able to release staff to do that. There was concern around the number of unplanned extubations in babies. We've again put in a number of make safes there. We've improved our simulation and increased our simulation training and some of the education around that. But the key thing that we changed was a tape to secure the tubes within the babies. And I'm pleased to say, since all those measures have been put in place, we haven't had any unplanned intubations to date. Documentation, unfortunately, was criticised. The teams have taken this on and really owned this issue. They've formed a multidisciplinary group to, first of all, create standards, because there aren't any actual national standards to documentation. The training on those will start imminently, and that will then lead to monthly audits, which will be fed back to individuals. Another area that we needed to improve was the risk register. The risks for neonates were incorporated within the general paediatrics, so we've been working to separate those risks so that the neonatal risks are more immediately obvious. We've also developed a neonatal dashboard, and further on in the paper you can see some of the outputs of that, and indeed on the previous paper you will have seen some of that. That allows the teams obviously to be much more aware of data, and it's vastly improved our understanding of what's going on. And we have regular meetings both within the neonatal team and with our maternity colleagues, assessing that data and then actioning areas that can be improved. As far as improvements go, there's an appendix that details our neonatal improvement plan, and you can see from that that each area has designated leads and timescales. We are planning our strategy and vision, and that will be incorporated or align with the Health Board's 1,000 days conception to 1,000 days vision, as well as CTM 2030. The areas that just want to draw your attention to, we've already touched on it a couple of times, is the workforce. I think earlier in the meeting there was attention brought to the downgrading of the risk of workforce in neonates. I think that pertains to the consultant workforce, which actually I think we have, it's probably fair to downgrade. We have recruited, and IMSOP wanted us to make sure that there was consultant availability during working hours solely for the neonatal unit. We recruited another consultant towards the end of last year, and now the consultants are job planned to provide that cover. So that has been done. We are expecting to recruit a further consultant this year, which will make that plan even more robust. The areas that we do need to have some consideration for, though, is that we are outliers in both units for the number of therapists that are on the unit and the therapies that we're able to provide, and we don't have a supernumerary shift coordinator, which is the norm in most units, and we are putting together business cases and options papers for the Health Board to look at that. And I think that is most of what I wanted to draw your attention to. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Sorry, Dom, did you want to add something before I invite questions?
No, it's more just sort of just say, I think that gives a reflection for the board of just how multifaceted this is and just how many areas there are that all, it's a juggling act at the moment to keep them all going, and the team are doing an amazing job at managing that. But as you can be seen from there, that there are some areas of concern still that we're working on, but we are on top of them and aware of them. So yeah, all credit to the team for working on here. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Are there any points or comments or questions that anyone would like to raise with either Sally or Dom in relation to the paper? Can't see any comments or questions there. So can I just say thank you very much for sharing us the work that you've been doing on neonatal service improvement, and we also appreciate you've shared with us some of the challenges and some things that we're still working on. And I know that we've got good processes in place to scrutinise and assure how things are progressing. So thank you both for your presentation to the board today. Can I then go on to item 7.4, please, which is the performance dashboard, and I invite Linda Prosser to present the report, which members have been asked to note.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In fact, Gareth and I have agreed that we should go straight to him because he can talk more specifically about the delivery, and quite a lot of it's been covered already.
Okay, sorry, welcome Gareth, and thank you. Over to you.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as at each board, oh, I've just lost my notes, sorry, bear with us 1 second. As at each board, we've included within the report a broad range of measures, and we'll assume colleagues have had the opportunity to review that paper and can raise any specific questions accordingly. In advance of that, though, there are a couple of key areas that it's worth me highlighting since the submission of the report. On the urgent care agenda, the report highlights a number of issues relating to the 4-hour wait and ambulance handover performance in particular, with the primary area of focus being at Prince Charles Hospital. These are areas which have been well covered within board meetings previously, and we continue to focus on as part of the overall improvement programme. We are undoubtedly in control of some of the areas that we could manage better, and we have covered that in some detail, but it's worth highlighting that the fundamental problem does remain egress from our acute sites. This is an area of focus for our gold, silver and bronze command structure, and we'll continue to work closely with our local authorities on, but the fundamental shortfall in care home capacity and social work provision is at the basis of most of our flow issues within each site. It's a problem National Government continue to battle with, and actually the Health and Social Care Committee have a detailed hearing around this issue today. It's an issue for all health boards and just worth being mindful of. It's also worth feeding back a good news story. Colleagues will recall the unannounced visit we had from HIW into Prince Charles Hospital back in September, which raised a number of significant concerns, and we've briefed separately on that. We had a second unannounced visit last week from HIW, and this was overwhelmingly positive. Some areas of improvement have been identified in this second visit. All have been recognised by HIW as being contained within our improvement plan, which received a great deal of positive feedback. These focus predominantly in ambulatory care, which is an area that we've been working heavily on, and some significant pathway changes we still need to make within gynae and paediatrics. But the HIW were assured that the immediate make safes required from the first report had been covered off. It's worth reflecting for a second that we were particularly pleased with some of the feedback that was gained in terms of the overall response. HIW described the department as feeling like a different hospital to the hospital they visited in September, and reflected that this is the single most impressive improvement that they have seen under their remit. The formal report will be submitted in coming months, and I'm sure will reflect that along with the specific changes that are required. But it is just worth us taking a second to hear that positive feedback, particularly as a real reflection of the hard work of the leadership team, the team members at all levels, our trade union partners, and basically everybody that's been involved in taking the work forwards, which has had a material improvement as a result of it. Moving on to cancer care, it's worth highlighting that the performance against the suspected cancer pathway continues to be managed very closely because of its poor current position. The enhanced monitoring process that we put in place shortly before Christmas is locking the sites and ILGs into a more detailed weekly review progress, and is beginning to see some improvements across the board. There may be continued deterioration in performance over the coming months, in particular areas around breast gynecology and lower GI. This is broadly as a result of the diagnostic element of the pathway. So the enhanced monitoring allows us to solve the outpatient problem which we had, but obviously what that does is moves the patient capacity issues along the diagnostic into the diagnostic stage. And we are yet to have our mobile endoscopy unit be deployed. That lands with us on the 14th of February and will come on stream on the 4th of April, which will allow us to clear backlogs around the endoscopy related diagnostic work. But we still have issues with our radiology and pathology diagnostics that relate to breast and gynecology. And with the number of patients that these account for, this will have a significant impact on our suspected cancer performance going forwards. The enhanced monitoring process is the mitigation around that, and we'll continue to track actions and performance closely. And finally, a new range of priority delivery measures have been issued by Welsh Government since this report was completed. They've been issued through NHS Wales by the Health Minister, and these are likely to see an evolution in the performance report going forwards to make sure our performance report aligns with those priority delivery measures for all health boards. And those are probably the key points to highlight, Emrys, and happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Gareth. I could invite Linda Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Gareth, hi. Thanks for the update on cancer. As you might imagine, I looked at this and I was really concerned about the 62-day wait metric in particular. You mentioned about the new endoscopy unit coming on site from the 4th of April. Is there anything that can be done above and beyond that? And you know, when I look at this and look at I think that this health board is an outlier from a cancer 62-day wait perspective versus the other health boards in Wales, and the gap is increasing, the numbers are increasing. I just wonder if there's anything else that could be accelerated, or any other, you know, just what other considerations might have been done to look at this.
Sure. So on the endoscopy side, there is an entire history around the procurement of the mobile endoscopy unit. We had initially worked towards having it in July last year, but for reasons that I won't go into in detail now, but happy to brief you offline, Linda, that was delayed through to April. We have been able to pull that forward. It's actually supply chain issues that everybody will be familiar with that have delayed the provider, a company called InHealth, in getting that positioned at Royal Glamorgan as quickly as possible. They should have an 8-week deployment program once landed. They've been able to pull that forward, and we've been able to do the water treatment work in an accelerated way as well. So we've actually already shortened from what it should have been to allow us to get into the 4th of April, but we are equally disappointed in terms of how long that's taken for matters that are outside of our hands. The enhanced monitoring process that we put in place before Christmas has had a material impact in our outpatient capacity, and that's been really helpful, and in forensically reducing the 104 and 62-day individual waits. But the crux of it does relate to diagnostic work, particularly within radiology and pathology. We have outsourced pathology work. We will be outsourcing the routine work to allow us to focus on the cancer specific work. So on the pathology side, I believe we've got a plan. I believe we have a plan in place, but that will take approximately 2 weeks to really catch back up on the pathology side and reduce waits from something like 14 weeks down to the 10 days that's anticipated. So that's a good piece of improvement. I'm more worried about the radiology, which will affect gynecology and breast. And those two areas, actually, if I'm being frank, we are still working on with radiology colleagues to bring in additional capacity and to deploy that we do into the most important areas first. And I'd expect to bring a further update next time round, Linda.
Okay, thank you for that, Gareth. Ian Wells, question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Emrys. Thanks, Gareth. A quick question is just trying to understand the use of RAG rating, particularly on page 4, performance. It's got ambulance handover times. You mentioned ambulance handover times previously. The RAG rating on there is green. Now, I admit there's been an improvement, but it's still quite poor in terms of the overall level. Are you rating it as green because the target was improvement and therefore you've hit the target? But I would still classify it as an area of concern, so I'm not quite sure how you're using that RAG rating.
Yeah, Ian, we'll need to amend that, and I'll just need to double check that. If I'm being brutally candid, the ambulance handover times at 15 minutes, the 4-hour waits and the 12-hour waiting waits are such an area of focus for us that actually I rarely default back to the health board report on this, so I will just make sure that the trigger for the green, red and amber marking is correct, because as you say, that should be marked as red. But being no doubt, it is the primary area of focus for us within the improvement programme for unscheduled care as a whole. It's the area of highest risk for us, because that not only in the patients outside an ED, as you know better than the most, the ambulances that are not able to then be redeployed out into the community represent our biggest risk. So I'll change the report. That's just a simple.
Thanks, Gareth.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. And Gareth, can I then invite Dom Herford in, please?
Thanks. Don't worry, Gareth, I'm not going to grill you. It was more just to follow up on Linda's comment earlier on about the 62-day back to cancer. So I didn't get my comment in quick enough. It was just to say that, you know, we did have a lot of, as Gareth was saying, we had a lot of Welsh Government interest when we obviously produced that report for them, and there was also a concern exactly what, almost word for word, what you just said, Linda. We have produced another paper for them. We've been through it with them. They're assured that we are on the right path, that we've got all the right things in place to be able to start addressing that and come back to it. So I just wanted to add, just to Gareth's point, that from my side as well, we're not happy with it, but we know where we're going with it, and we're assured that we're on the right process for that, and Welsh Government are assisting us with that, and are also happy for us running with that at the moment, so that gave me extra assurance that we were doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other further comments or questions? No. Just from my perspective, I just want to say is that obviously, there's still some areas that's been identified today that we've got to improve on performance, and there are action plans in place for that. And at the future board meeting, we would just inform the board how we're progressing in those action plans. And the other important point I just want to mention is that in respect of A&E and the HIW report, I think that's quite, that is quite an incredible comment to hear from HIW, that this is the most significant improvement they've seen in an area in that sort of space of time as to what we're doing. So it does go to show that we're developing and putting in systems and processes to respond to any sort of issues that we're identifying with within the health board. So, well, thank you to you, Gareth, and the team that have been working on that. It's very much appreciated.
No problems. I'll pass that back, because it's very much the team on the ground that have delivered that. So I'll make sure that's back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I now move on to the next agenda item, please? And the next agenda item is the. Sorry, Linda, did you want to come in on anything? My apologies. No? Okay. Can I move on to the next agenda item, please, which is 8.1, which is the month 9 finance update. And I invite Sally May to present the report, which members have been asked to note.
Thank you. I'll take us through this in a fairly brief way, because members will have read the report. As you can see, we're currently reporting a very small year-to-date underspend of approximately 200,000 and forecasting break-even for the year end. There are a few issues within our forecasting that I just want to draw to your attention, and some of it relates to some of the conversations we've already had today. Clearly, the changes around Omicron and are having impacts on our spend patterns across the piece, particularly in planned care recovery, where activity levels will almost inevitably be lower than we first expected, but there are other increases in costs that will offset that. So we remain confident around our forecast to break even. Just have to flag one issue that probably is quite material in delivering that, which is our annual leave accrual. So last year, members will remember that people were enabled to carry forward up to 20 days, sorry, for up to 2 years. And this year, I think we're still finalising the potential carry forward. It is at least 6 days, but it could be 11, subject to final conversations. And there is a pay deal that allows people to potentially sell back some of their annual leave. It is therefore vitally important that we have accurate ESR records that set out both people's brought forward leave and their in-year leave position. So there's an exercise that Howell's team have been leading on that. writing out to everyone, asking them to log on to ESR and to make sure that that is up to date, which is due to complete by the 17th of February. That will confirm any movement in our overall annual leave provision, and we are expecting and we're assuming that any changes in that will be matched by a corresponding annual allocation adjustment, whether it's up or down. So it's really important that we get that right, because there's some quite significant numbers involved in this. Our annual leave accrual for last financial year was 13.5 million, for example. So it is a really significant issue. And the other issue I particularly want to draw members' attention to is our savings performance. Again, this has been impacted on in part by the ongoing COVID response issues and by difficulty in engaging with clinical and operational teams around the development and delivery of their savings plans. But the forecast deficit, our forecast underlying deficit, has deteriorated to 51.4 million from 50.6 million at month 8, because we've seen a further deterioration in our savings delivery, and that is impacting into next year. So clearly, as we start to recover and reset post-COVID, or when we're living with COVID, we will need to start to develop programmes of work that will start to get us back to what the allocation letter is calling normal levels of efficiencies and savings. And I wouldn't underestimate how big an ask that is, given some of the issues that we've got out there currently and that need to re-engage with people. So that's really what I wanted to just specifically draw attention to. The only other element is capital. There is significant work ongoing to deliver to our CRL by the year end. We have, as I think I've briefed IAMs before, tend to overcommit by around 10% in our discretionary programme. It is a big programme this year at 73.9 million in our CRL. We're currently got quite a way to go to finalise our spend plans, or to deliver our spend plans against that. The team is really working very, very hard on it. There are issues within the market, but wherever possible, we substitute and bring forward expenditure. And we've had quite a bit of discussion about digital this year, and part of our programme of managing our capital across the years has involved us bringing forward some of the digital expenditure, replacement servers at around £1 million. So I think it is a challenge around capital, and we're mindful of getting the best value out of it this year, especially given the ongoing constraints in capital in the next 3 years. So happy to take any questions, but those are the things I really wanted to draw people's attention to.
Okay, thank you for that, Sally. Are there any questions or comments for Sally, please? Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sally. Sally, just picking up on the carryover of leave, where you've said it could be 6 or it could potentially be as much as 11. I understand a letter has gone out to some members of staff, but I don't think the letter was clear, was it, as to how many they could potentially carry over. And I know everybody's got to do their ESR by the 17th of February, but what concerns me is, if we're not sending a message of how many days they could potentially carry over, are we going to have staff thinking, well, I've got 15 days, I'm going to hold on to those and I'll carry them over? So are we going to let them know potentially the amount soon?
I'll bring Howell in, because I can see he's about to come in. Regardless of what is able to be carried forward, though, it is vitally important that we get an accurate record of everybody's leave, so that the requirement for what they might want to carry over or what they might want to sell back is a second step compared with getting their records accurate. But I'll bring Howell in there.
Yeah, exactly that, Sally. So we're taking a staged approach to this. So what we're doing at the moment is asking staff to update their annual leave records up to the end of January and indicate what leave they'd like to take in February and March. We wouldn't normally make decisions about carryover of annual leave in January, so we've got a little bit of time to do that. And as soon as the negotiations with the trade unions nationally have concluded, and some comms comes out about that, which we believe is imminent, we will then share what the annual leave arrangements will be, but they won't necessarily, just to be clear, be an across the board entitlement. It'll be the same principles as we've applied before. So if you've not been able to take your annual leave due to the pressures, that is one thing. We wouldn't expect everybody else to be taking 10, 11 days annual leave over to the next year, because we would, of course, from a well-being and indeed a legal perspective, encourage all of our staff to take as much of their leave as they could.
Can I just come back, Chair, if that's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Appreciating all of that, Sally and Howell, you know my feelings. I think if staff can take their leave, they're absolutely exhausted, they should. Plus there's a massive impact on services if we have loads of staff carrying forward. But I think the letter that went out says you can carry over. I don't think it was clear saying there is a possibility, but in some circumstances you won't be able to. So what I think we need to do is just make sure our messaging is clear.
I think I'll let Hal come back on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll take another look at that. I mean, the letter wasn't intended to address that issue at all, actually. All it was intended to do was get people ready for it. So I don't think it clarified it either way, because we didn't know what the arrangements would be. So we can pick that up separately and have a look at it.
Yeah, because I did have one of the letters, Howell, and it does say you can carry over.
Okay, noting that comment then, Nicola, are you happy that Howell said he'll take note of this and deal with it outside the meeting? Yeah? Okay, are there any further comments or questions for Sally, please? There are no further comments or questions, and I know that you've given us pretty detailed briefings before as independent members as well, so thank you for your report today, highlighting the areas of challenge for us going forward as a health board. So thank you for that, Sally. Can I go on to the next item then, please, which is 8.2, and it's Cwmtach Morgannwg 2030, Our Health, Our Future, Strategic Goals and Priorities. If I could ask invite Linda Prosser to present the report, which members are asked to approve, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be familiar, we've been working on this for a few months, and I'm seeking formal adoption of these 4 strategic goals and the 4 priorities in each of those areas. I'll just describe them very quickly. The first is creating health, by which we mean improving health outcomes, reducing inequalities and health inequalities, and parity between mental and physical health, and really working how to support our communities to be more health creating and resilient, and being healthy as an organisation ourselves, taking care of our staff, improving care, quality, access, etc. A lot of what we've talked about today. Sustaining our future, ensuring that we now think about the impact we have on the planet through how we design and deliver healthcare, and also ensuring that we are financially sustainable, and inspiring people. That partly relates to the first one. It's about inspiring our own staff, but also people in the population. What I would say about these 4 is that they very much echo the objectives set out in A Healthier Wales about 3 years ago. They're actually quite similar to the previous objectives of the Health Board, and those values set out in prudent healthcare and value-based healthcare. It's very similar. What this does is to achieve a simplicity that makes those 4, creating health, improving care, sustaining our future, and inspiring people, memorable. And it's given us a basis around which to organise our activities, even the agenda today. So we're starting to adopt this as a way of describing how we do our business. Chair, we simply hadn't brought these for formal approval, but we have discussed them in board development sessions, and there's been lots of work with various individuals and stakeholders to co-create these. So I'm asking people to formally adopt and sign them off.
I've got a couple of questions here, Linda. We've got Patsy, if you could come in. I invite Patsy first and then Kelechi, please.
Hi, Linda. I think it's really helpful, and to have just such a sort of specific and sort of quick reference to it is really good. The one thing that bothers me, and I think I've said this before, is creating health and what that actually means to people. And even in your introduction, you've just said creating health, and by that I mean it's sort of suggesting it needs an explanation. Now, I don't know what word could quickly and sort of directly say what's in the box, and totally agree with what's in the box, but I don't know if creating health says it, but I don't know what does. So that's, you know, maybe not ever so helpful, but just a view, really.
And I thanks, Patsy. I don't think we would necessarily disagree that by going very brief, sometimes it needs a bit of explanation. Several heads, not just mine, have been scratched to try and describe that in 2 words in a different way, but we keep coming back. We keep coming back to this. Yeah, it might not be everybody's cup of tea. At the moment, we don't have a better suggestion. So yeah.
Do you have any thoughts yourself, Patsy? Just
No, I don't.
The spot. It's not like promoting health.
Yeah,
is it?
no, I was just thinking. I mean, I think I recognise you need to get it approved and you need to get it sorted and move on. But
what's good about it is that it is active, and it is about us working with people and communities, and it is, you know, about individuals really being active in their health creating journey. So that, you know, I think the more we work with it and explain it and bring it to life, I think the more it does make sense. And yeah, I know that
it's around reducing inequality, isn't it? And if it said reducing inequality, everybody understands what that means. Doesn't mean everybody is the same, but I don't mean to put a spanner in the works at this stage, Linda. It just struck me as not being as self-explanatory as the other 3, which are absolutely, you know, understandable from the second you see the 2 words. So it's just a comment, really.
Yeah. Sorry, just you've given some good thought for us there anyway, Patsy. And I suppose, is it, sorry, I don't want to labour it either, but is it creating positive health? Is that what it's but maybe outside the meeting we can talk about that. Can I just invite in the first one, Dom, if I could invite Dom in on this first, and before I get in the next one. Sorry about that, Kelechi.
Thanks, Chair. It was just really on the comment that Patsy was making. I would just say that these have actually been circulated already and being used in our workshops already with clinicians and multi-agency people. That's not come up as a problem. I can see now what Patsy's saying, it makes me realise it that way, but it's not been taken that way, and I think people have taken it in the right way that they needed to. So I think it is the right description for it, judging on what people have said. So that would be my only comment on it. But I agree, we'll probably take this out discussion outside of here.
Okay. Can I invite Kelechi in, please?
Thank you. Interestingly, it was on the creating health one I was going to pick up on earlier. So I think I hear where Pat is coming from, and if there are any bright ideas as to how we might get a more compelling and easily understandable phrasing for it, will be very open to that. But I recently, Public Health Wales just published an interesting piece of work that actually highlighted that inequalities costs the NHS. So I'm not just talking about the wider system now, specifically the NHS, about £332 million every year. And you can translate that into the cost of a new hospital and the numbers of beds that we could potentially put. So health inequalities, I think for me, one thing that is pleasing, this is explicitly saying that we're going to put tackling health inequalities at the very center of what the health board is doing. And however, tackling health inequalities for me is, if I may borrow a phrase that health is created at home. So I think the genuine intention here is about creating health, but it's a recognition that health is created at home. Health is not created in 3 district general hospitals. Health is created at home, and therefore working with our communities and with other partners is going to be fundamental to our capacity to create health. And I think that's what that objective, in a sense, or that goal is aiming to unpack. So I think the genuine intention is about creating health, but within that is implied the reality that we can't, as a health board, create health on our own. It's not in our gift to create health. That creating health really happens at home. And therefore, the question is, what can we do as a health board to enable our communities create health? And a typical example is that last element of those 4 points, which is how do we, as an organization, demonstrate that we are a health promoting organization? Because there's no point pointing at our communities and saying you need to be physically active when our staff are not physically active, our staff are smoking in front of hospitals. So I think it's that taking the responsibility to be what we're asking our communities to be, but having the humility to recognize that it is not in our gift entirely. It's about how we support our communities to create health. So I think the intention is genuine, but if we could get a smarter phrasing for it, why not?
Okay, thank you for that, Kelechi. Can I invite Ian in, please? Ian Wells.
Yeah, thanks, Emrys, and thanks, Linda. I think I love this. I love having a visual representation of where we're going. But if I can make a little suggestion, and you feel free to ignore it or shout at me. For me, what it doesn't do for me is it doesn't shout population health agenda. It doesn't jump out at me. It does if you read the detail, but it doesn't sort of immediately jump out. And a little suggestion, I'm not a graphic designer, but the circle in the middle which says our strategic goals, we've got a nice comment underneath our health, our future, which says building healthier communities together. Could we have the building healthier communities together written around the circle, something like that, just to jump out to say, look, this is a population health agenda, this is the direction we're moving in. I don't know, maybe somebody smarter in this area maybe come up with another idea, but I feel it needs to jump out a bit more.
Yeah, this we can do.
Right, thank you, Ian. That's a good suggestion. And then if I've got another comment, is it Caroline, please?
No, not one from me.
Sorry, have I missed out anyone on the comments there? No. Caroline, did you want to ask a question? Sorry.
No, thank you. No.
So my apologies. There doesn't seem to be any further comments or questions here. The only thing I would ask, Linda, is that obviously these 4 goals and our values that we've got within the organisation are the key drivers of what we're going to be taking how we're going to be taking our services forward for the future. And it's really positive to see how they're up here on this graphic. And I'm no graphic expert either, so I can't make any comments on that, but I can certainly about the 4 goals and our values. The only thing I would just like to inquire about really is that, and you did touch base on it, is that how we got to that, the sort of systems and processes. Did we go through a set meetings with multi-agency? How did we actually get to that?
So I think we started internally. We've done some board development workshops. We've also worked then with there's a steering board for CTM 2030, which has got users on it. But we're actually all service users and public representatives on it. But we've also worked with some clinical teams. As we said, we've tested them in the strategy workshops we had in December, and we've just closed last week a public engagement exercise saying, what do these mean for you? I think Dilys has just referenced one of those activities where these have been tested. People are responding well to them. I don't know if you ever get it 100%, because actually the questions aren't, it's never about the intention or the meaning. It is always about, can we add another word to the 2 words? And we're really trying hard not to make it memorable. So my sense is that they've been aired. There's been plenty of opportunity for people to comment and to road test whether they help us with, because the whole point of them is that they help us with discussions and the design of our strategy and our services and what we do. And my sense is that, you know, overarchingly that's been positive.
Okay, thank you. So there's just in what you're saying there, Linda, there's a clear process we've gone to before we've got to this, to these greater. Okay, I can see that.
One thing I will add is that we're really conscious that in this representation of it, the values is not visible at all. It's the little green box on the bottom, and we need to find a way of making that more prominent and more interwoven with how we take it all forwards.
Okay, thank you. I can see that Greg wants to come in as well, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Linda, you just preempted my question. So Linda will be aware, colleagues, that I chaired on behalf of Paul the leadership forum across the organisation yesterday. Linda presented this, and it was fantastic in relation to the amount of energy from our staff that were commenting, although there were some comments made around the visibility of our values, and Linda's just mentioned that, Chair, you know, just for a reminder for board colleagues, you know, and Howell will correct me, I'm sure we had about 5,000 or 6,000 staff contribute to the extensive piece of work around our values development last year, and it would be a crying shame, I feel, if the values, you know, weren't more explicit within this new brand that we're building. So, but Linda's aware of this, so thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Greg, and points well made. Okay, I don't think there's any further comments or questions. So just to confirm the request from Linda is that we are approving the goals that have been identified for our board today. Are we all happy with that? Yes, it looks like we are. Okay, I'll ask if there is any other business. I've not had anything else that was shared with me prior to the meeting. No. And then my final comment is there anybody got to offer any comments as to how we did in this meeting, or is any lessons learned that we might want to take forward for a future board meeting? You know, can I just add one thing I would say is I know one of the things that George raised earlier is that the a lot of what we get presented at our board is that a lot of, you know, we've had committees or scrutiny meetings or things have been scrutinised prior to coming to the board as well. It may be just useful, I think, sometimes that when we come to the board that we take note of the scrutiny or the assurance or the types of meetings that have occurred before we've actually got the paper to the board. It's just a food for thought there. I can see that we've got another comment coming in. That's from Fiona, please.
Thanks. I mean, it's been a great board meeting. We've kept really well to time, so well done chairing and for everybody in keeping to time. I just wondered though and reflected on the patient's story. Our patient story was given by a member of staff. Now, I understand with the patient story we had, it would have been difficult to have had the patient, but it would have been powerful to have had the relatives. And I just wonder if somehow we could perhaps have an even more powerful story if we could video relatives. They don't necessarily need to come to the board, but if there's some way we can get the voice of the people that we serve, I think that would be really helpful.
That's a good suggestion, Fiona, and it's certainly something we can consider for our next board meeting. And obviously from our perspective, we're always looking to further develop the quality and effectiveness of our board meeting, and I think that's a very good suggestion. Thank you. Okay, that comes to the end of our meeting. The date and time of the next board meeting will be held on Thursday, the 31st of March 2022 at 10 o'clock. Rydw i'n dod ar cyfarfod o brwd iechyd I ben a hoffwn I ddiolch I bawb sydd wedi ymuno â ni a gwylltio cyfarfod heddiw. I now bring the board meeting to a close and would like to extend thanks to all who have joined and observed in the meeting today. Thank you. Diolch.